Greetings, my dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs. Tonight, we reopen the archives of the wizarding world to revisit stories, legends, and moments too remarkable to be forgotten. Welcome to the Wizarding Archives. My dear wizards, witches, muggles, and squibs, if you enjoy our journeys through the wizarding world and wish to support this project, there is something very simple you can do. Leave a like and subscribe to the Spellbook Chronicles. For you, it costs nothing. For us, it truly makes all the difference. Dumbledore never had to worry about the algorithm. Thank you from the bottom of our wizarding hearts.
Of Mischief, Marauders, and Lilies.
It all began on September 1st, 1971. As tradition held, it was the first day at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry for many young witches and wizards, eager to embark on their own journeys into the wizarding world. Aboard the Hogwarts Express, surrounded by the lush green of the Scottish Highlands, the destinies of two boys became forever intertwined.
My name's
James Potter and Sirius Black shook hands, unaware that this simple gesture would be just the beginning of a friendship that would shape the course of events and future generations in the wizarding world. Pure blood heirs of their respective families, the friendship between the two boys, so similar yet so different, was cemented the moment the Sorting Hat placed them both in Gryffindor. James had hoped for it so dearly, yet at the same time he knew well that, just like his father Fleamont and his grandfather Henry before him, it was in the house of Godric the Brave that he would find his place. Deep down, he knew that within the corridors of that castle he had imagined for so long, an infinity of stories and adventures awaited him, ready to be lived and one day retold. Indeed, it was on his 11th birthday, in anticipation of his admission to Hogwarts, that Fleamont revealed to James the truth about the precious heirloom that had been passed down from one generation of Potters to the next for centuries. The invisibility cloak. James already had at least a dozen ideas about how to use it at Hogwarts. Would his father be angry if he shared the truth about their family heirloom with young Sirius Black? Probably. But then again, the cloak was his now. Sirius, on the other hand, was the eldest son of the noble House of Black, a once notable pure-blood wizarding family. The third of his name, born to Orion and Walburga Black, both dark wizards and second cousins, Sirius also had a younger brother, Regulus, with whom he never had a close relationship. Sirius felt different, an outsider. In fact, he considered Regulus to be a better son than himself. The Black family held a strong belief in pure-blood elitism. They refused to associate with muggles, muggle-borns, squibs, and blood traitors, even disowning squib family members like Sirius's great-uncle, Marius Black, and insisted that their family only marry within respectable pure-blood circles. Because of these beliefs, they were often forced to marry their own cousins. They also held the dark arts in high regard. In contrast, from a young age, Sirius had a fascination with the Muggle world, shown by his interest in motorcycles. With a strict Slytherin family tradition, his sorting into Gryffindor became a pivotal step in the decline of his relationship with his family. Despite the hatred directed towards him, particularly from his mother and his cousin Bellatrix, Sirius greatly enjoyed life at Hogwarts with his friend James. The two had become practically inseparable, facing adventures together and getting into one scrape after another. During their first year, James formed a friendship with two fellow Gryffindors, the lonely and quiet Remus John Lupin and the clumsy, chubby Peter Pettigrew. Peter, who had put the Sorting Hat in a dilemma during the ceremony, taking over 5 minutes to decide whether to place him in Slytherin or Gryffindor and making him a hat store, was the typical anonymous kid teased for his clumsiness. He looked up to James and Sirius as his idols, skilled in magic, courageous, and admired by all their classmates. Peter, frequently targeted by older students and Slytherins, was often bullied and mocked, much like young Remus, who hid a tragic past behind his reserved nature. His father, Lyle Lupin, a world-renowned expert on non-human spiritus apparitions, such as poltergeists and boggarts, had been contacted by the Ministry of Magic as the Dark Lord rose to power and the First Wizarding War loomed. Alongside other experts on dark creatures, he was sought out in hopes of better understanding the threat and keeping it in check. Lyle gladly accepted an invitation to join the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. In early 1965, Fenrir Greyback was questioned by the Ministry of Magic regarding the deaths of 2 Muggle children. Although he was caught with a pack of werewolves, the Ministry failed to realize that Greyback was one himself due to the poor upkeep of the werewolf registry. Greyback posed as a harmless Muggle tramp, which convinced most of the committee, except for Lyle Lupin, who noticed telltale signs of lycanthropy and recommended keeping Greyback in custody until the full moon, just a day away. However, Lyle's remarks about werewolves being soulless and evil led to his expulsion from the meeting, and Greyback was released, later escaping with the help of accomplices. Greyback soon planned his revenge, and thus began the tragedy. Shortly before Remus Lupin's 5th birthday, the werewolf broke into his bedroom and attacked the defenseless boy, marking him with a curse that would accompany him for the rest of his life: lycanthropy. Little Remus had become a werewolf himself. His parents took him to various healers and did everything they could to make him a normal boy again. But there was no cure for his condition. Yet, despite the difficult situation and the prejudice of the wizarding world against Remus, Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, as was his custom, acted against the tide by making special accommodations to allow Remus to attend Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. After the first difficult year at school, during which he kept his status as a werewolf a secret from all the students, inventing stories to explain his monthly disappearances, things changed when some friendly boys from his dormitory, James along with Sirius and the goofy Peter Pettigrew, managed to sense his secret, discovering his true nature. Remus, terrified and certain that his life at Hogwarts would become even more challenging now that his secret was out in the open, was instead taken aback by the playful demeanor of his friends. They started joking around with him on a waxing moon night, trying to help him approach his lycanthropy in a light-hearted and playful way. They began calling him Moony, and from that point on, even the dreaded full moon nights became, for the first time, not so terrible thanks to the company of friends. Friends who would forever protect his secret. Thus, amid jokes and laughter, on that night in late October, the quartet of the Marauders was born. The 4 friends gradually became inseparable, gaining increasing notoriety within the halls of Hogwarts. Remus began to earn respect. Peter stopped being bullied and even started teasing the more arrogant students himself. As for James, along with Sirius, who were already popular and by their 2nd year had become respectively chaser and beater for the Gryffindor Quidditch team, they became even more so, making them the most sought-after boys by the girls at school. Despite their popularity, there was one girl in particular, a fellow Gryffindor in the same year as the Marauders, who seemed to harbor no particular fondness for the quartet. Quite the opposite. A Muggle-born girl with flowing red hair and sparkling green eyes, Lily Evans. Lily's best friend, Severus Snape, a half-blood who had been sorted into Slytherin, was often targeted by the group, especially by James Potter, who was always looking for an opportunity to mock him, derogatorily nicknaming him Snivelous Snape.
Oh, my valiant adventurers, I bring you news that shines brighter than any Loomis. 3 enchanted tiers: Curious Wanderer, Enchanted Explorer, and Master Adventurer. The room of requirement? Nothing but a broom cupboard in comparison. With us, you'll gain early access to every episode, a secret Discord service to keep you ahead of everyone else, and that's not all. Priority replies to your comments, a direct channel to help you choose new content together, and even exclusive wallpapers taken from each episode. And it doesn't stop there. For the bravest among you, extra videos with my director's notes and reflections on the episodes already released. Because, let's be honest, you can never get enough of your dashing wizard adventurer, Quentin Pettigrew. Click join below for all the details. Joining the Spellbook family is a small gesture that supports our journey and allows us to bring content truly worthy of our audience. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts for being here. And you muggles listening in, I beg you tell me, what on Merlin's beard is a Discord server supposed to be?
Not that James's intentions were ever malicious, but in those years the young Potter was still immature, so sure of himself, and yet, deep down, not certain at all. He never failed to seek out occasions to test himself, always demanding more from both himself and his friends, whom he dragged each day into new exploits and improbable adventures. Severus Snape once remarked that James was so arrogant that criticism simply bounced off him. This rebellious attitude was notably shaped by the negative qualities he developed, such as the habit of ruffling his already messy hair to make it look even more disheveled, as if he had just jumped off his broomstick. He enjoyed hexing Slytherin students, especially Severus Snape, merely for the sake of doing so. But if Snape was targeted, it was also because James aimed to get noticed by Lily Evans, that intelligent and beautiful Gryffindor girl, the only one with enough guts to stand up to him and tell him off. Lily didn't like James at all. To her, he was nothing more than a self-centered show-off. His behavior towards her friend Severus was intolerable in her eyes.
Leave him alone.
James and Snape had a strong rivalry throughout their time at Hogwarts. Some believe this began due to Snape's jealousy of James's talent in Quidditch and his popularity, as well as Snape's interest in the dark arts, which James despised. However, it is also known that James and Sirius had gotten off on the wrong foot with Snape from the beginning. When they first met Snape during their first year on the Hogwarts Express, they insulted him for his desire to become a Slytherin and mocked him for his nose, setting a solid foundation for rivalry. Their subsequent interactions only served to intensify this conflict. Snape followed the Marauders around, looking for reasons to get them expelled. James, in turn, used the hexes that Snape himself had created against him. Days passed at Hogwarts, and with time and the physical changes typical of adolescence, lycanthropy became increasingly difficult for Remus to manage and endure. To ensure his safety and that of his peers, the boy was taken to a shack each month during his transformations to prevent him from attacking other students. However, this isolation led him to lash out in frustration, causing villagers in Hogsmeade to mistake his screams for those of violent ghosts. To keep the truth about the noises a secret, Dumbledore encouraged these rumors, resulting in the Shrieking Shack gaining a reputation as the most haunted building in Britain. During those years, the Wolfbane potion had not yet been invented, and the psychological pressure Remus faced in trying to combat his curse was making him more and more sullen, gaunt, and silent. It was then that the young Sirius had an insight, an idea as crazy as it was unfeasible. What if on full moon nights, he, James, and Peter could become animals as well? Perhaps Remus would feel less alone. Perhaps that anger and ferocity that overtook him on those nights would be subdued. But how could all this become a reality? Naturally, the three Marauders would need to become animagi. Becoming an animagus is considered one of the most difficult magical skills to master. James smiled. A new venture, a new mission. Reckless, unlikely to succeed. He couldn't have asked for anything better. To become an animagus, a witch or wizard must undergo a long and challenging ritual. The process begins with the individual keeping a single mandrake leaf in their mouth for an entire month, from one full moon to the next. If the leaf is removed or swallowed, the process must start over. On the next visible full moon, the wizard must spit the saliva-covered leaf into a small crystal vial that captures the moon's rays. They then add one of their own hairs, a silver teaspoon of dew collected from a place untouched by sunlight or human feet for a week, and the chrysalis of a death's head hawk moth. This mixture must be placed in a quiet, dark location without disturbance. The wizard must wait for a lightning storm, chanting the incantation Amato Animo Animato Animagus every sunrise and sunset. If done correctly, they may sense a second heartbeat while touching the wand to their chest, which is normal and should not interrupt the process. When the lightning storm occurs, the wizard retrieves the vial, which should contain a blood-red potion if the previous steps were followed correctly. They must then move to a secure location to safely transform and, using their wand, recite the incantation one last time before drinking the potion. Once completed, the witch or wizard gains the ability to shift between their human and animal forms at will, with or without a wand. However, any mistakes in the process could lead to disastrous results, such as permanent half-human, half-animal mutations. After successfully completing the ritual, the animagus experiences a vision, revealing their new animal form. For 3 years, the Marauders secretly studied and followed the rules of the ritual, trying to achieve their animal forms. And so it happened, during their 5th year at Hogwarts, that the first among them succeeded. Sirius transformed into a powerful dog, black as night. Following him was James, who was able to become a stag with impressive antlers, both animals large enough to keep the wolfish Remus in check. Meanwhile, Peter managed to become a rat. Once a month during the full moon, Sirius, James, and Peter would sneak out of the castle under James's invisibility cloak, transform, enter the Whomping Willow, walk down the tunnel, and meet Remus in the Shrieking Shack. Under their influence, his lycanthropy became more manageable. While his body remained that of a wolf, his mind became less wild in their presence. The 4 of them soon left the confines of the Whomping Willow and roamed the school grounds and Hogsmeade by night. Having become animagi and never officially registered as such with the Ministry of Magic, the Marauders coined nicknames to accompany Moony. Sirius became Padfoot, Peter became Wormtail, and James became Prongs. But throughout all those years at Hogwarts, the Marauders did not hold back, quite the opposite. In fact, during their 5th year, they perhaps tested their greatest invention, a magical artifact of incredible power and wisdom, infused with the personalities of its 4 creators, the Marauders' Map. They created the map using the Homunculus Charm, a powerful and advanced spell that enchanted it to track the movements of everyone in the castle.
Pad, right corner. Yes, mate.
The ability of Sirius, Peter, and James to become animagi allowed them to explore the castle grounds undetected at night. Meanwhile, the interior of the castle was mapped over time with the help of James's invisibility cloak. This map proved quite useful to the foursome over the years, until it was confiscated by Argus Filch. Although the precise circumstances surrounding the Maker's loss of their artifact are mostly unknown, it is easy to conclude that they eventually overreached and were cornered by Filch, likely due to a tip-off from Snape, who had become obsessed with exposing his arch-rival, James Potter, for wrongdoing. The animosity between the Marauders and Severus Snape, especially James, worsened day by day. Supporting the quartet was Patricia Rakepick, a Gryffindor a few years older, with whom they had formed a close friendship. In addition to their shared hatred for Snape, Patricia also had the same adventurous spirit and tendency to break the rules. Because of this, she was detested by most of the professors, who considered her a bad influence on younger students, except for Albus Dumbledore, who regarded her as an exceptionally talented pupil. In many ways, she could be seen as the true mentor of the Marauders, imparting to them cunning and the art of devising sophisticated pranks and tricks. At that time, Patricia was likely the only other person to whom the Marauders had confided the existence of the map. One afternoon in the spring of their 5th year, James and Snape had yet another heated exchange. But this time, James crossed the line, bullying the Slytherin by using a spell he had invented that turned him upside down to reveal his underwear, humiliating him in front of many students, including Lily. She demanded that James stop, but he responded, "I will, if you'll go out with me, Evans." When James lifted the jinx, Snape, in his humiliation and anger, called Lily a filthy little mudblood, deeply hurting her. Immediately, Potter demanded that he apologize, but Lily retorted that James was as bad as Snape and that she would not date him.
"I wouldn't go out with you if it was a choice between you and the giant squid."
This event deeply shook both Lily and Severus. Although it seemed no less trivial than many other moments in the daily lives of adolescents at Hogwarts, it would leave an indelible mark
Welcome,
on their bond,
Severus.
shattering the balance that had existed and setting off a chain of events that would ultimately alter the fate of everyone in the wizarding world. Following this event, Potter and Black were expelled from the Quidditch team. James became quiet, likely beginning to develop a sense of guilt over the cruelty he had shown towards Snape. In contrast, Sirius's animosity toward the Slytherin remained unchanged. On yet another full moon night, Snape grew increasingly curious about where Remus went each month and observed Madame Pomfrey taking him to the Shrieking Shack through a secret passage beneath the Whomping Willow. Sirius took advantage of Snape's curiosity and, as a joke, told him that the trick to getting past the Whomping Willow was to poke the knot at its base. Snape followed Sirius's instructions and was nearly at the Shrieking Shack when James pulled him back. At great personal risk, James saved Severus from certain death at the hands of Remus in his werewolf form. However, Snape stubbornly refused to believe that his old rival had acted out of goodwill, assuming instead that Potter had saved him only to avoid expulsion, and he loathed being indebted to him. Albus Dumbledore swore Severus to secrecy, but he now understood Remus's true nature. The relationship between James and Snape did not improve, but at least it didn't worsen. They simply kept their distance from each other as much as possible. In the meantime, when he turned 16, James's parents allowed Sirius to move in with them so he could escape his own horrible family. Sirius had made a point of hanging Gryffindor banners all over his room at number 12 Grimmauld Place to emphasize his differences from the rest of his family. In addition to the shrine to Godric Gryffindor, he decorated the rest of his room like that of a typical Muggle boy his age. He put up pictures of motorcycles, fighter jets, and posters of models, honoring Muggle achievements in a way that irritated his family. But nothing angered them more than the fact that Sirius found Muggle women attractive. His attitude, completely at odds with the Black family ideals, ultimately led to him being disowned, officially cut off, and replaced in their eyes by his younger brother, Regulus. At Hogwarts, time flew by. The classes became increasingly intense, and even in the rebellious, adventurous spirits of the Marauders, a more mature character began to take root, with their eyes turning toward the future and their destinies once their time at school came to an end. By his 7th year, James had matured considerably, shedding much of the mischievous streak that had once defined him. Despite never having been a prefect, he was appointed head boy alongside Lily, with whom he had the chance to spend more time. The two got to know each other better, and Lily, who had distanced herself from her friend Severus, due to his growing sympathy for the Dark Lord's cause and his Death Eaters, began to develop feelings for James Potter. He stopped hexing others for fun, though he and Snape still occasionally hexed each other in secret, with hints that James was willing to let it go for Lily's sake. Around this time, he finally managed to win Lily over,
Potter,
and they began dating.
you won.
Against all initial odds, the two fell in love. And with the love of James and Lily, the end of their 7th year at Hogwarts also marks the end of the Marauders legend. But the story of the 4 wizards continues, albeit in another chapter, that of the Order of the Phoenix, and the first wizarding war against the Dark Lord. However, that is another story.
Of choices, war, and prophecies.
Once, there was a group of 4 young friends, 4 wizards, bold in spirit, driven by ambition, bound by unshakable loyalty to one another. They shared a fierce desire to leave their mark on the wizarding world. They were known as the Marauders. Their years as students at Hogwarts had come to an end, but the bond they shared remained unbroken. Though hope still shaped their vision of the future, a shadow loomed ever closer, a threat growing with each passing moment. The war, once spoken of in whispers, had finally begun. The First Wizarding War, as the Daily Prophet had dubbed it, and from the very start, it was clear that this would be no fleeting conflict. How could it be that even Albus Dumbledore, by many considered the greatest wizard of all time, the very man who had defeated Gellert Grindelwald and ended the global wizarding war in 1945, now seemed troubled by the rise of the one whose name most dared not speak, Voldemort?
Dumbledore, a
James Potter could scarcely believe it.
You're joking.
The young wizard had only recently married the love of his life, the witch Lily Evans, in a quiet ceremony, one kept secret from many due to the ever-present dangers of war. Though the conflict had only just begun, the safety of those who opposed Muggle-born discrimination and the ideology of pure blood supremacy was already in constant jeopardy. And for those who dared to stand openly against it, the risk was even greater, not just for themselves, but above all, for those they held dear. The Death Eaters were on the hunt, ready to spread terror and enforce their ideology with an iron fist, wielding the darkest and most forbidden of magical arts. Not since 1717, when they were outlawed by the Ministry of Magic, had there been such a staggering number of victims claimed by the unforgivable curses. And to such violence, the Ministry responded in kind. Bartemius Crouch, as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, led the Ministry's campaign against Voldemort's forces, his hatred of the dark arts becoming infamous. Any voices calling for moderation were swiftly silenced as Crouch launched a nationwide crusade against Voldemort and his followers, one marked by a level of brutality, ruthlessness, and mercilessness that had never been seen before, taking even the Death Eaters by surprise. The war had now reached a point of no return.
He was tipped as the next Minister for Magic. He's a great wizard, Barty Crouch, powerfully magical and power-hungry. Oh, never a Voldemort supporter. No, Barty Crouch was always very outspoken against the dark side. But I would say he became as ruthless and cruel as many on the dark side.
James and Lily, feeling powerless in the face of the ongoing slaughter, knew they had to act.
Justice will be served.
It was a sentiment shared by their dearest friend, Sirius Black, who had stood by James's side as his best man on their wedding day. Sirius, having severed all ties with his own family due to their fanatical pureblood ideology and their unwavering, even financial support of the Dark Lord's war campaign, felt a personal duty to stop his cousin Bellatrix. Rumors spoke of her swift rise through the Death Eater ranks, becoming one of Voldemort's most devoted and lethal followers, leaving a trail of bodies in her wake. But it was different thoughts that weighed heavily on young Remus Lupin. He felt the shadow of his past creeping back, darker and more insidious than ever. The name Fenrir Greyback, the werewolf responsible for his curse, was once again being whispered in fearful tones after years of silence. Alongside giants and many other werewolves, Greyback had become one of the Dark Lord's most dangerous enforcers. With each passing month, the full moon grew heavier upon Remus. His curse, once a closely guarded secret, had over time become common knowledge. Despite graduating from Hogwarts with top marks, he found himself unable to secure any kind of employment, shunned and rejected at every turn. Because of Voldemort, werewolves had once again become a feared menace, much as they had been in the dark centuries of the Middle Ages. Peter Pettigrew, on the other hand, the least daring and perhaps the least talented wizard of the group, could do little more than echo his friends' frustration, offering his support and proving himself ready to do whatever was needed, should they call upon him. He cared for them deeply. To Peter, they had always been like brothers. At Hogwarts, they had looked out for him, pulling him out of trouble, time and time again. And now, faced with the looming dangers of war, Peter felt vulnerable, lost without his fellow Marauders by his side. And yet, something inside him was beginning to change. He started to feel small, too small. Why did James always have to be the bravest? Why was Sirius always the most skilled duelist? Why was Remus always the cleverest? And why did he always have to be the most insignificant? Peter longed to prove himself, to do more, to be more. Above all, he craved the chance to make a difference, to earn the admiration of his friends at last. It was an autumn day in 1977 when the lives of the four friends, along with Lilies, were forever changed. Albus Dumbledore had summoned them for a message of the utmost secrecy.
There's a group,
he told them. A group formed to combat Voldemort's growing power and the ever-mounting threat he posed. A secret group, never officially sanctioned, by the Ministry of Magic. And yet, a group whose mission many believed in, the Order of the Phoenix. So the rumors were true. For years, whispers had circulated about a society of rebellious witches and wizards, those bold enough to risk everything to stand against Voldemort and his Death Eaters on the front lines. And now, at last, the opportunity they had all been waiting for since leaving Hogwarts had arrived. The Order of the Phoenix had been founded by Albus Dumbledore in 1970, back when they were only just beginning their school years, when the First Wizarding War was little more than a prelude to the darkness yet to come. But from the very start, the wizard had known that Lord Voldemort, born Tom Marvolo Riddle, a former Hogwarts student just like them, was a threat that could not be underestimated. Perhaps in time, he would prove even more fearsome than Gellert Grindelwald himself. Over the years, many Aurors loyal to Dumbledore had joined the Order of the Phoenix, taking part in covert, strategic strikes aimed at dismantling the Dark Rebellion. Thanks to their efforts, the group had built an intricate counter-intelligence network, one that proved invaluable in the escalating war. Particularly ingenious was Dumbledore's innovation, modifying one of the most complex spells known to wizardkind, the Patronus, to serve not only as a guardian, but also as a messenger, capable of speaking and carrying vital information between members of the Order.
We know where he is.
And so, James, together with Lily and his friends, became part of history, officially joining the Order of the Phoenix. The superiority of Voldemort's forces had already claimed several victims within the group, such as Fabian and Gideon Prewett. The Bones family was almost entirely wiped out. Benji Fenwick was brutally murdered, and so was Marlene McKinnon, whom Rubeus Hagrid described as one of the most powerful and brilliant young witches of her time. Her entire family was obliterated. Yet despite the heavy losses, the Order of the Phoenix still had formidable members within its ranks. Chief among them was the veteran Auror, Alastair Moody, whose relentless efforts were said to have filled half the cells in Azkaban with Death Eaters he had personally captured. Moody had gained a fearsome reputation, known to have killed several of Voldemort's followers, including Evan Rosier, a duel that left him with significant facial scarring. However, despite the Ministry granting Aurors free rein to use the unforgivable curses, Moody only resorted to lethal force when absolutely necessary. His skill and determination were exemplified when, after 6 months of relentless pursuit, he managed to capture Igor Karkaroff alive, an achievement that coincided with some of the most crucial arrests of the war. The Order received a much-needed reinforcement with the arrival of powerful witches and wizards. Not only James and Lily, but also Frank and Alice Longbottom, their former Hogwarts classmates, who had recently married and were exceptionally skilled. Over time, the couple drew the ire of Bellatrix Lestrange, not by provocation, but simply by excelling in their duty. Their skill and determination led to the capture, arrest, and imprisonment of numerous Death Eaters throughout the First Wizarding War, making them a thorn in the Dark Lord's side and a prime target for his most ruthless lieutenant. Frank and Alice, like James and Lily, were among the few who faced Voldemort himself in direct combat, a duel unlike any other. The Dark Lord, intrigued by the sheer skill and bravery James and Lily had displayed, extended them an invitation to join his ranks, eager to claim such talented and fiercely loyal witches and wizards for his cause. To James, Voldemort promised a reign of peace and security, after what he deemed a necessary war to restore order. With Lily, however, he preyed upon her deepest insecurities and fears, the abandonment and rejection by her sister, a muggle consumed by envy, incapable of understanding or appreciating the gift of magic. Yet neither of the two Gryffindors were swayed by the Dark Lord's seductive words. They escaped his grasp and faced him once more, twice defying him and surviving. The same fate befell Frank and Alice. 3 direct encounters with Voldemort, 3 times they lived to tell the tale. A coincidence that, in time, would not be overlooked by the Dark Lord's superstitious mind. The autumn of 1979 brought with it an unexpected glimmer of joy amidst the ever-present shadow of war.
Big news.
Lily and James were expecting a child, a son they would name Harry. Peter, Remus, and Sirius, who was later chosen as the boy's godfather, could not have been happier. For a brief, precious time, the horrors of battle seemed like nothing more than a distant, fading nightmare. But alas, that fleeting sense of peace was merely an illusion. A decade into Voldemort's rise, a prophecy emerged. A prophecy that would irrevocably shape the fate of the wizarding world. A child born at the end of July to parents who had defied the Dark Lord thrice would possess the power to vanquish him, though neither could live while the other survived. A young seer, Sybil Trelawney, in an unexpected trance, revealed these words, overheard in part by Severus Snape, the old rival of James Potter, who had by then become one of Voldemort's most trusted servants. Yet his love for Lily proved stronger than that for the Dark Lord, and he chose to betray him. He revealed everything to Dumbledore, disclosing the enemy's plans. Voldemort, who until the last moment had wavered between the Longbottoms and the Potters, both having opposed him 3 times, both with a child born in July, had finally chosen the young Harry. James had to be warned. The Potters had to disappear, and quickly. With the help of a carefully devised plan orchestrated alongside Dumbledore, they decided that the safest course of action was to take refuge in Godric's Hollow. The old wizard had spent his childhood there, and still had trusted allies willing to offer their support. Among them, the renowned magical historian Bathilda Bagshot. Nevertheless, the Order believed that, to ensure the couple's utmost protection, it would be essential to select a secret keeper, a witch or wizard designated to hide a secret by means of the Fidelius charm, embedding it in their very soul. Once a keeper was selected, the person who told them the secret would find themselves unable to pass the information on again, as the secret keeper was the only one capable of revealing it, whether orally or written. The secret keeper could tell as many people as they liked, but they must do so voluntarily. The secret couldn't be blackmailed, bewitched, or tortured out of them.
An immensely complex spell involving the magical concealment of a secret inside a single living soul. The information is hidden inside the chosen person, or secret keeper, and is henceforth impossible to find. Unless, of course, the secret keeper chooses to divulge it. As long as the secret keeper refused to speak, you know who could search the village where Lily and James were staying for years and never find them, not even if he had his nose pressed against their sitting room window.
James and Lily had no doubts. Sirius was to be their secret keeper. He was, after all, their most trusted friend.
We trust you.
The most loyal, the most capable.
No.
But Sirius disagreed. In a desperate bid to outwit Voldemort, he persuaded them to choose Peter Pettigrew instead. After all, who would ever suspect timid, unremarkable, easily overlooked Peter?
It's the safer way.
In the warmth of that summer, on the 31st of July, 1980, Harry Potter came into the world. For a time, within the quiet sanctuary of their hidden refuge, Lily and James devoted themselves entirely to their son.
What is it?
Shielded from prying eyes and guarded with the utmost care, those first months were filled with love and laughter, a fleeting moment of peace in a world teetering on the edge of darkness. So reads a letter written by Lily to Sirius during those days, later found by Harry many years after.
Dear Padfoot, thank you. Thank you for Harry's birthday present. It was his favourite by far. 1 year old and already zooming along on a toy broomstick. He looked so pleased with himself. I'm enclosing a picture so you can see. You know it only rises about 2 feet off the ground, but he nearly killed the cat and he smashed a horrible vase Petunia sent me for Christmas. No complaints there. Of course, James thought it was funny. Says he's going to be a great Quidditch player. But we've had to pack away all the ornaments and make sure we don't take our eyes off him when he gets going. We had a very quiet birthday tea, just us and old Batilda, who has always been sweet to us, and who dotes on Harry. We were so sorry you couldn't come, but the orders got to come first, and Harry's not old enough to know it's his birthday anyway. James is getting a bit frustrated shut up here. He tries not to show it, but I can tell. Also, Dumbledore's still got his invisibility cloak, so no chance of little excursions. If you could visit, it would cheer him up so much. Wormy was here last weekend. I thought he seemed down, but that was probably the news about the McKinnons. I cried all evening when I heard. Batilda drops in most days. She's a fascinating old thing with the most amazing stories about Dumbledore. I'm not sure he'd be pleased if he knew. I don't know how much to believe, actually, because it seems incredible that Dumbledore could ever have been friends with Gellert Grindelwald. I think her mind's going, personally. Lots of love, Lily.
Unfortunately, things didn't go as they had hoped. Just as they believed Voldemort would underestimate Peter, they had done the same. Throughout that final year of the war, Peter had remained in the background, unnoticed. No crucial missions had ever been entrusted to him. He had begun to feel useless, his frustration festering first into self-loathing, then into resentment toward his friends. Amid the chaos of death and brutality that defined the First Wizarding War, Peter's thoughts grew twisted, darker with each passing day, until at last, fear took hold. Perhaps, he thought, if he revealed the secret to the Dark Lord, his own life would be spared. Perhaps Voldemort would even show mercy to James and Lily. After all, it was the child he truly wanted. Maybe, for the first time in his miserable existence, Peter would be rewarded for his actions. Maybe, for once, he would finally be someone. And so, Peter Pettigrew made his choice. He betrayed his friends, revealing their secret to the Dark Lord, and in doing so, he sealed his fate, becoming, at last, a Death Eater. On Halloween night, 31st October 1981, Pettigrew disclosed the Potter's location to his master. Voldemort arrived at Godric's Hollow, and with the Fidelius charm broken, he simply entered their home. Once inside, he murdered James and Lily, who were unarmed. The two young members of the Order could do nothing against Voldemort's might this time. However, an inexplicable event occurred that night, perhaps the most mysterious and baffling moment in the entire history of the Wizarding world. When the Dark Lord aimed his wand at the infant, unleashing the deadly green light of Avada Kedavra, the curse that kills without any chance of defense, it rebounded, causing no harm to little Harry. Instead, the curse turned upon its master, disintegrating his body. Among all the theories surrounding this occurrence throughout history, one explanation stands out above the rest: love. Lily's selfless sacrifice for her son created a powerful protective barrier of ancient magic around Harry that shielded him for many years to come. Just as James's values, and those of all the generations of Potters before him, seemed to live on in the little boy. Through the stories others told of his father, through his own imagination, through something in his blood, or perhaps simply because deep inside, he already knew everything he needed to know.
Of heroes, family, and future.
And so, we have finally arrived at the story we all know, that of Harry Potter, the boy who lived. It is thanks to his deeds, his Hogwarts adventures, and the friends who helped shape him as both wizard and man, that we can tell this tale today. And so, rather than recount the years of Harry Potter the student, the ones everyone knows, today, I turn instead to those that came after. After the Battle of Hogwarts, a night of fire, ruin, and fierce defiance, the castle stood silent at dawn. Lord Voldemort had been defeated, this time for good, and would never return.
Let's go.
With Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, his closest friends, at his side, he climbed the familiar staircase to the headmaster's office, where Dumbledore's portrait waited in stillness. There, surrounded by dust from shattered shelves, Dumbledore spoke of what had been done, and of what remained to be done. Harry agreed. The infamous Deathly Hallows were far too powerful to be left for others to find. The cloak of invisibility stayed in his keeping, as it always had. Its protection had long been the Potter's responsibility, and so it would remain. He left the resurrection stone buried beneath the old trees of the Forbidden Forest, and the Elder Wand, after repairing his own wand, he returned to lie once more in the quiet earth of Dumbledore's grave. In time, with every Horcrux destroyed, even the last faint thread connecting him to Voldemort dissolved. Parseltongue faded from his tongue, like a dream he no longer needed, the final sign that the darkness he once carried had finally left him. The Second Wizarding War had ended, leaving the world both scarred and quiet in its aftermath. The young Harry Potter returned not to celebration, but to a burdened peace, the kind that only those who have faced death and lived can understand. While Hogwarts had been a battlefield in its own right, the wider wizarding world still teetered on the brink of chaos. It was in this fragile dawn that Kingsley Shacklebolt, newly appointed Minister for Magic, sought to rebuild not only the ministry, but the very trust of witches and wizards in their leaders. Harry, who, together with his friend Ron Weasley, had chosen not to return to Hogwarts to complete his 7th year, unlike Hermione Granger, was surprised when he was offered a place in the Aura training program.
Come on, mate.
His experience, after all, likely outweighed any diploma.
Brilliant.
And so he accepted, embarking on the career of an Aura, just as he had long dreamed since his 5th year at Hogwarts. At only 26, he became the youngest head Aura ever appointed. Years of fighting, of witnessing friends and foes fall alike, had tempered him into a wizard both precise in skill and unwavering in resolve. Once within the Aura department, Harry's reputation as a skilled duelist and strategist quickly became evident. Alongside his longtime friend Ron Weasley, he began reshaping the division from within, instilling a discipline and vision that had long been absent. No longer would Auras merely respond to threats. They would anticipate them, prepare for them, and act with the precision of those who had truly seen the darkness. Under his guidance, the Aura program evolved into something both rigorous and adaptive. Harry's battle experience, his deep knowledge of dark magic, and his unwavering moral compass became the pillars upon which a new generation of Auras was trained. In the years that followed, Harry remained closely tied to Hogwarts, often returning to lecture on defense against the dark arts, sharing the hard-won lessons of his youth with new generations of students. He ensured that Severus Snape's portrait hung quietly among the others in the headmaster's office, blending into the room as if it had always belonged there. The exploits of the trio were no longer whispered in secret. They had become stories told openly, celebrated on chocolate frog cards, retold with a mixture of awe and fond disbelief.
Come on, Harry.
Harry's life unfolded in private ways he had not anticipated.
Cousin?
He visited his cousin Dudley and his family from time to time,
Hey, Big D.
and maintained a civil, measured relationship with Draco Malfoy.
Potter.
The sharp edges of their schoolboy enmity softened, though never entirely gone. As expected, Harry married Ginny Weasley, a bond forged through years of shared trials and quiet understanding at Hogwarts. After the Second Wizarding War, their romance rekindled with a steady, unspoken intensity, shaped by both the relief of peace and the lingering shadows of the past. Ginny pursued her passion for Quidditch as a chaser for the Holyhead Harpies for several years, but always returned home with a spark in her eyes that made Harry's heart settle a little easier, until eventually she retired to focus on their growing family. The couple soon welcomed 3 children into a world finally at peace. James Sirius, Albus Severus, and Lily Luna. Each carried the Potter legacy in their own way, but at home, in the quiet warmth of hearth and laughter, they were simply Harry and Ginny's children, and their parents' hearts were full in a way that neither the triumphs nor the battles of the past could ever have prepared them for. James, the eldest, was bold and mischievous, much like the 2 troublemakers he was named after. Quick with a teasing remark and ever eager to stir his younger brother, he inherited the Marauders' charm and love of mischief. Confident and independent, life seemed easier for him than for most, and his humor made him well liked among his peers. As expected, the Sorting Hat placed him in Gryffindor. Albus, by contrast, was quiet, kind, and reflective, bearing a closer resemblance to his father. He carried Harry's irrational fear of being sorted into Slytherin, a fear realized once he arrived at Hogwarts, along with a fascination for his father's past and fame. Albus often struggled under the weight of a family legacy he had never asked for, and he was sometimes bullied for being different. Reserved and careful with his words, he preferred solitude, yet he shared a quietly deep bond with Harry, perhaps the closest of all the siblings. Lily, the youngest, mirrored her mother's spirited nature. Jealous of her older brothers, when they left for Hogwarts, she inherited Ginny's playfulness and curiosity. Talkative and bright, she delighted in conversations with her cousin Hugo, imagining which house they might be sorted into. And, like all Potters before her, she found her place in Gryffindor. Even as the children pursued their own adventures and dreams, Harry and his wife's world continued alongside theirs, shaped by both love and responsibility. Ginny later channeled her love of the sport into her work as the senior Quidditch correspondent for the Daily Prophet, bridging her two worlds, family and passion, while Harry continued to safeguard the wizarding community, both as a leader and as a father. And, at the same time, he embraced the role of godfather to Teddy Lupin, the son of the late Remus Lupin and Nymphadora Tonks, offering the boy the care and guidance that his own godfather, Sirius Black, had been unable to provide. Teddy quickly became a fixture in the Potter household, attending dinner multiple times a week and blending seamlessly into the rhythm of the family. Harry continued to guide the Aura department with a careful hand, championing the rights of werewolves and shaping reforms that aimed to blend justice with compassion. Not every initiative, like the effort to make Wolfsbane Potion freely available, reached its goal, but the intent mattered, quietly reshaping how witches and wizards thought about fairness and responsibility. Over the years, his influence spread beyond the office. When breaches of the Statute of Secrecy arose, Harry was there, not simply to enforce the law, but to weigh each choice with reason and care. Challenges came often, yet the Potter name endured, just as we continue to preserve it today, remembering that across the centuries much changes, yet the deepest values remain. In the wizarding world, as in the Muggle world, we are all beings who walk the same earth and live beneath the same sky. And the Potter family has always remembered that.
Of family, brilliance, and the greater good.
At the end of the 19th century, the wizarding world stood at a crossroads. Throughout Europe, old Muggle regimes were falling one after another. In England, the Industrial Revolution had transformed cities, railways spanned continents, and scientific progress seemed to edge Muggles closer to discoveries that deeply unsettled the wizarding community. The Ministry of Magic watched with growing concern as their technologies advanced, fearing these tools might one day expose the existence of magic. It was in this tumultuous historical context that during the warm and tranquil days of August 1881, a child was born, one who would be remembered as the greatest and most powerful wizard the world had ever known. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. The son of Kendra, a Muggle-born witch, and Percival, a pure-blood wizard and a prominent figure in the noble Dumbledore family, whose crest features a phoenix. According to an ancient legend, this magical creature shares a unique bond with the family. A phoenix would come to the aid of any Dumbledore in desperate need. From his earliest years, young Albus displayed an exceptional talent for magic, particularly in his ability to understand it at its very core. He questioned even those things that others deemed trivial or self-evident. His curiosity seemed an inexhaustible well, a trait that would, over the years, evolve into an insatiable and at times obsessive thirst for knowledge. His attitude and thinking were exceptionally mature for a child, making him an immediate and protective figure, particularly towards his younger brother, Aberforth, but most of all towards his younger sister, Ariana. The Dumbledore family, during those years, lived a happy life in Mold on the Wold, a village that, like many others in England, such as Godric's Hollow, Tinworth, Upper Flagley, and Ottery St. Catchpole, became a place where witches and wizards settled in numbers after the International Statute of Secrecy, relying on one another for mutual support while living alongside a Muggle population. The days passed carefree, but as we know, no idol lasts forever. It was an ordinary day, that afternoon in 1891, when little Ariana, only 6 years old, was playing near the hedge in the backyard. Unexpectedly, the young girl began manifesting her magical powers without being able to control them, as is normal for a witch of her age. But something unexpected happened. 3 Muggle boys, hidden nearby, had been secretly watching Ariana and witnessing her magical abilities. They demanded that she reveal the secret behind her magic, insisting she demonstrate the power they had just seen. However, Ariana, due to her very young age and magical immaturity, was unable to fulfill the Muggles' request. Perceiving this as a refusal, the boys used it as an excuse to channel their instinctive fear and misunderstanding of magic into a brutal act of aggression. This dramatic episode, in addition to leaving an indelible mark on Ariana's psyche and compromising the rest of her life, also tore a deep wound in the Dumbledore family, especially in her brother Albus. A wound that would never fully heal and would irreversibly shape his worldview and future ambitions as a young wizard. As a result of the attack by the Muggles, Ariana began to withdraw into herself, speaking less and less each day. Her once sunny and playful demeanor was replaced by a shadow fueled by terror. The trauma of what had happened was so overwhelming that the young girl developed an uncontrollable anxiety about her magical nature, which, little by little, began to fade, suppressed by her fear. Many scholars of magic agree in theorizing that what was slowly developing within Ariana Dumbledore was none other than an obscurus, a dark and parasitic force that emerges when a wizard child consciously suppresses their magical abilities or is forced to do so due to physical or psychological abuse. This energy can manifest as a separate entity, erupting in violent and destructive fury. For her father Percival, seeing the condition to which the 3 Muggles had reduced his daughter was something that could not be ignored. Aware that the magical law enforcement would never intervene in such an insignificant case, the wizard arrived at the only possible solution. He would take justice into his own hands. It was an evening like any other when Percival found the 3 boys and attacked them with fierce fury. What those monsters had put his little girl through had to be avenged at any cost. Although Percival spared the lives of the Muggles, it is likely that he inflicted unbearable pain using the Cruciatus Curse. The gravity of his actions was impossible to ignore, and it wasn't long before the sentence for his immediate arrest was issued, swift and unyielding. When asked, the wizard never revealed to the authorities the true reason for his attack. Had the truth come to light, he believed, little Ariana would surely have been taken from her family and placed under strict observation at St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries for the rest of her life, effectively locking her away permanently as a danger to the international statute of wizarding secrecy. And this, he thought, could never happen. His daughter deserved to be kept safe, yes, but also loved and protected by her family. So, Percival Dumbledore was arrested and imprisoned in Azkaban, where he would remain until the end of his days. As a result of Percival's imprisonment, unpleasant rumors began to spread about the Dumbledore family in the village. The idea took hold that the attack on the 3 boys had been driven by a pure-blood ideology, fiercely anti-Muggle. A notion that was rather absurd, considering that Percival's wife, Kendra, was a Muggle-born witch. The woman, in order to preserve the integrity of the Dumbledore family, and above all, to protect her children, wisely decided to leave Mold on the Wold behind and settle in the village of Godric's Hollow. Despite the move, Ariana's condition worsened with each passing day. She began experiencing sudden, uncontrollable fits of rage, unleashing her repressed magical power with devastating force. Her brother Aberforth was the only one capable of calming her, even more so than Kendra, who had grown increasingly cold and withdrawn. She turned away every neighbor who came to welcome the family to Godric's Hollow, showing no exception, even for Bathilda Bagshot, a promising magical historian who would later gain fame across the wizarding world for her book A History of Magic. When Bathilda arrived at the Dumbledore's door with a tray of homemade cauldron cakes, Kendra slammed the door in her face without a second thought. While Kendra cared for Ariana, forbidding her from leaving the house, rumors began to spread through the village about the Dumbledore's squib daughter, allegedly kept hidden away in a locked cell. Albus and Aberforth stopped mentioning their sister entirely, learning to lie about her existence until the lie became the only truth anyone knew. Albus, now on the verge of his admission to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, showed little interest in Ariana, unlike Aberforth, who remained deeply attached to her. Instead, Albus spent countless hours poring over books and scrolls, absorbing all the knowledge he could about magic. His brilliance did not go unnoticed by Bathilda Bagshot, who, in the years to come, would follow his academic career with great fascination. The summer faded into autumn in the year 1892, marking the start of Albus Dumbledore's first term at Hogwarts, where he was sorted into Gryffindor House. Under the leadership of Headmaster Phineas Nigellus Black, the school, like the wizarding world itself, was recovering from turbulent times. Just 2 years earlier, in 1890, Professor Eleazar Fig, the esteemed magical theory instructor, had lost his life during a raid led by the rogue goblin Ranrock, who sought to seize a hidden repository of ancient magic buried within the castle for decades. With the aid of a fifth-year student, however, Hogwarts had narrowly averted disaster, putting an end to the Loyalist Goblin Rebellion once and for all. On his very first day at Hogwarts, Albus formed an unlikely friendship with Elphias Doge, a boy still bearing the marks of a recent bout with dragonpox, his skin tinged green and pockmarked, a condition that left him isolated and avoided by most. But Albus, with a rare blend of empathy and insight, saw past the surface. Where others turned away, he extended a hand, drawn to the kindness and depth of character beneath Elphias's outward affliction. A boy who in time would become one of his most trusted friends. At Hogwarts, Albus discovered a sanctuary where he could indulge his insatiable thirst for knowledge. Nearly immediately, he became one of the most notable students at the school, not only for his unparalleled magical creativity and brilliance, but also due to the crime committed by his father. Rumors circulated among the student body, speculating about Albus's supposed disdain for muggles. Some feared and criticized him for it, while others idolized him. Yet Albus had little regard for gossip or the opinions of others, choosing instead to focus on his own path. He threw himself wholeheartedly into his studies, even taking non-compulsory subjects like study of ancient runes. As the most exceptional student of his time, he was appointed a prefect in his 5th year, and later named head boy in his 7th. His extraordinary talent and relentless dedication to magical learning set him apart, paving the way for him to become one of the greatest wizards of his age. While much of his brilliance stemmed from his own efforts, he also benefited from the guidance of highly accomplished teachers who helped nurture his skills and unlock his full potential. His remarkable talents earned him trophies and honors, too numerous to count. Among these, he won the Barnabas Finkley Prize for exceptional spellcasting, served as the British youth representative to the Wiesengamot, and was widely regarded as perhaps the most brilliant student ever to grace Hogwarts. One whose future seemed poised to surpass even that of Merlin or the founders themselves. Thanks to his numerous achievements, Albus became remarkably well connected during his Hogwarts years, gaining the friendship and support of some of the most prominent scholars in the wizarding community. Among them was, of course, Bathilda Bagshot, but also Griselda Marchbanks, who examined him in his newts for charms and transfiguration, and later marveled that he did things with a wand she had never seen before. However, one figure stood above all as both a mentor and dear friend. The legendary alchemist Nicholas Flamel, creator of the infamous Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Life. Flamel passed down to Albus arts and secrets of magic so profound they defy the limits of ordinary understanding. During his years at Hogwarts, true to his Gryffindor spirit, Albus didn't shy away from dangerous adventures, often delving into the castle's secrets. Among these, he discovered the Spore Scrolls, a hidden collection left by Headmistress Phillida Spore, detailing the creation of the Magical Enhancer, a rare fungus capable of amplifying magical abilities. Fearing how the wizarding world might exploit such knowledge, he decided its hiding place was far too vulnerable. Taking matters into his own hands, Albus stole the box containing the Spore Scrolls and concealed it deep within the Forbidden Forest. Albus Dumbledore graduated in June 1899, and with the conclusion of his time at Hogwarts, he was forced to confront the harsh reality awaiting him. The fragile state of his family, and most of all, his sister, Ariana, whose struggles he had tried to ignore during the past 7 years. The girl, who had never been sent to Hogwarts, unlike her brother Aberforth, was by then widely considered a squib. Before settling permanently in Godric's Hollow, the young man planned to embark on the traditional grand tour with his friend Doge, a journey around the world undertaken by many graduates. For Albus, his studies had only scratched the surface of magical knowledge. There was an entire world waiting for him to explore. However, a tragic event prevented him from leaving. Ariana's suppressed magic, now at the age of 14, had become increasingly unstable. Though the exact circumstances were unclear, one morning, the intense emotions of the girl overwhelmed her, unleashing the fury and destruction of her own Obscurus. Over the years, it had fed on Ariana's pain, growing ever more lethal. Unfortunately, that day, her favorite brother Aberforth was not at home to calm her, and she accidentally caused an explosion that resulted in the death of their mother, Kendra. After what had happened, with no parents to guide them, Albus realized that it was now his responsibility to take care of his family, and most importantly, to care for Ariana. But despite his sense of moral duty, resentment began to take root in the young wizard. Albus returned to Godric's Hollow, feeling trapped and wasted. How could he improve and reach his full potential there, isolated in that country house? How could he ever become the great wizard everyone believed him to be, and fulfill his future? But fate had other plans, once again altering the course of events, when a young wizard of the same age as Albus arrived in Godric's Hollow from the distant north. The young man came to the village to live with his great-aunt, Bathilda Bagshot, in order to deepen his knowledge of the magical world. It was the summer of 1899, when Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald met for the first time, shaking hands.
Pleased to meet you, Albus.
After just a day of knowing each other, their bond quickly deepened into a close friendship. They spent hours together, exchanging ideas, discussing their dreams, and growing ever closer. They discovered they had much in common, sharing not only their ambitions, but a deep passion for magic. Albus had never encountered anyone as brilliant and charismatic as Gellert, someone so deeply knowledgeable about magic and so skilled in the use of its most complex spells. The young wizard shared with Albus the story of his expulsion from Durmstrang for immoral practices and experimentation with the dark arts.
And that's why
He explained how he had come to Godric's Hollow to further his knowledge of the magical world, especially the fabled artifacts known as the Deathly Hallows.
I'll find them.
According to legend, Godric's Hollow had once been the home of one of the 3 brothers from the tale, Ignotus Peveril, the possessor of the Cloak of Invisibility. For Grindelwald, finding the Deathly Hallows became an obsession, as he saw in them the power to enforce his vision and the courage to act for the greater good of the wizarding world and its preservation. Albus, too, quickly became captivated by Gellert's ideas of wizarding domination, partly viewing him as an unexpected opportunity to prove his own brilliance and escape the confines of his small, local life. But more than that, Albus found in Gellert's vision a solution and a kind of comfort to a problem that had ultimately led to the downfall of his own family. The existence of Muggles and their continued survival, left unchecked by the wizarding world, needed to change. The bureaucratic system orchestrated by the ministry was flawed, old and weakened by its own laws, and it had to be overthrown. During the 2 months that Gellert stayed in Godric's Hollow, the bond between the young men deepened, growing into something more profound and intimate. They fell in love, trusting one another blindly, understanding and caring for each other in ways they had never experienced before. Albus, swept up in the fervor of their shared vision, pushed aside any lingering doubts about Gellert's darker tendencies. He allowed himself to believe that the revolution they were embarking on was truly for the greater good. A term he had coined himself, which would later become the motto of their ideology. He convinced himself that any harm along the way would be justified, that the sacrifices they made would be repaid 1,000-fold when their vision was finally realized. This is how one of the letters written by Albus during the summer of 1899 reads:
Gellert, your point about wizard dominance being for the Muggles' own good, this, I think, is the crucial point. Yes, we have been given power, and yes, that power gives us the right to rule. But it also gives us responsibilities over the ruled. We must stress this point. It will be the foundation stone upon which we build. Where we are opposed, as we surely will be, this must be the basis of all our counter-arguments. We seize control for the greater good. And from this, it follows that where we meet resistance, we must use only the force that is necessary, and no more. This was your mistake at Durmstrang, but I do not complain, because if you had not been expelled, we would never have met. Albus.
By the end of the summer, fully aligned in their beliefs and ambitions, the two were ready to leave Godric's Hollow. They planned to embark on a journey in search of the 3 Deathly Hallows, and more importantly, to lay the groundwork for a global wizarding war, intending to force Muggles into subservience. Their shared goal was clear: to become the great leaders of the revolution, reshaping the magical world in their image. When Aberforth discovered this, he was furious. He saw Albus as a narcissistic egotist who, once again, had found a convenient justification to convince himself that abandoning his family was for their own good. The younger brother became aggressive, trying to persuade Albus to stay, not for him, but for Ariana, who desperately needed his protection. That night, the argument grew intense, and after another threat, it was Grindelwald who intervened. Aberforth drew his wand, but Gellert was quicker. The Cruciatus curse hit the younger brother, and he screamed, writhing in excruciating pain. Grindelwald couldn't help but laugh. "Foolish boy," he sneered as the pain echoed through the room. In that moment, Albus realized just how monstrous a person Gellert truly was. Overcome with horror, he stepped in to protect his younger brother, and a 3-way duel erupted. In the chaos, Ariana rushed down the stairs to see what was happening, desperate to stop the fight, but she had no understanding of the danger she was walking into. A flash of light from a spell struck her. No one ever truly knew which of the 3 wands had cast it. Ariana's lifeless body crumpled to the ground, her eyes wide open, but empty, devoid of life. Ariana Dumbledore was dead. According to theories, Grindelwald quickly retreated to his great-aunt's cottage, where he had her create a portkey to take him back home. Meanwhile, Albus rushed to his sister's lifeless body, his heart heavy with guilt and despair. As he knelt beside her, he cried uncontrollably, knowing that nothing, not even his deepest regret, could ever undo the tragedy he'd caused. This was the definitive event that shattered the bond between the 2 young wizards forever and, more importantly, marked a point of no return for Albus Dumbledore, shaping him into the man we know today. It is interesting to recall the answer Albus himself, many years later as headmaster of Hogwarts, gave to young Harry Potter's innocent question before the magic of the Mirror of Erised.
Professor Dumbledore, can I ask you something?
Obviously, you've just done so.
Dumbledore smiled.
You may ask me one more thing, however.
What do you see when you look in the mirror?
I see myself holding a pair of thick woolen socks.
Harry stared.
One can never have enough socks,
said Dumbledore.
Another Christmas has come and gone, and I didn't get a single pair. People will insist on giving me books.
It was only when he was back in bed that it struck Harry that Dumbledore might not have been quite truthful. But then he thought, as he shoved Scabbers off his pillow, it had been quite a personal question. The truth is that the image Albus Dumbledore saw reflected in the mirror, despite the passage of time, kept a deep, unhealed wound open, his family alive, whole and happy, Percival and Kendra restored to him, Ariana alive and freely practicing magic, and Aberforth reconciled with him. After his sister's death and his separation from Grindelwald, Albus traveled to France, spending time in Paris, studying the ancient art of alchemy under Nicolas Flamel. Perhaps he sought both to give his brother space and to channel his grief into something productive rather than succumb to despair. It is unclear when he returned to Britain, but by then, Albus had developed an intense interest in dragon's blood, ultimately discovering 12 new uses for it. This remarkable achievement earned him widespread recognition and paved the way for an offer to teach at Hogwarts. Deeply fond of the school and drawn to teaching since his youth, Albus gladly accepted. And so it was that the wizard returned to the castle, not to learn this time, but to teach. Burdened by the secret knowledge of Grindelwald's imminent rise to power and wanting to rectify past mistakes, it was natural, perhaps, that he felt drawn towards the job of defense against the dark arts instructor, a position in which he could most easily prepare his charges for the dangers he knew one day would come. Albus, who would henceforth come to be known to successive generations of students as Professor Dumbledore.
Of war, duty, and sherbet lemons.
1926, a pivotal moment for the wizarding world, mirroring the growing tension and instability of Muggle Europe. Economic crises, social unrest, and the unsettling rise of increasingly authoritarian nationalist movements marked the continent's response to the devastating aftermath of the First World War, a tragedy from which Muggles were still struggling to recover. A grim, yet unsurprising scenario, at least not for Gellert Grindelwald, who had foreseen the danger posed by Muggles and their innate self-destructive tendencies years before. Albus Dumbledore, the young professor at Hogwarts, knew this all too well. But he also knew that the true threat to the wizarding world at that moment, greater than Muggle hatred and recklessness, was Grindelwald's unquenchable thirst for power. A desire that would stir and feed an ancient resentment in witches and wizards, inciting them to war and ultimately leading them to become not so different from the very Muggles they so despised. Thanks to the vast network of contacts and acquaintances Albus had cultivated over the years, a result of his growing reputation as the most talented and promising wizard of the century, he managed to track Grindelwald's movements and deeds, though it weighed heavily on his heart. The wound left by the loss of his sister, Ariana, was more open than ever, still bleeding with guilt. Facing the mere mention of Gellert Grindelwald's name meant confronting the unresolved nightmares of his past, his greatest pain. To face him meant confronting the chilling truth that haunted his every night's sleep. Was it Albus's wand that had ended Ariana's life? It was a question to which the wizard would never find an answer, a shadow that would follow him to his final days. One thing, however, was certain. If his sister were watching him now, she would be ashamed of him, just as his brother Aberforth was.
Albus.
Yet, as an exceptionally powerful and capable wizard, it was his responsibility to be prepared for the looming threat, despite the anguish, despite everything, for the good of the wizarding world, and the entire world, for the greater good. During those years, he had learned that Grindelwald's obsession with becoming the master of death by claiming all 3 Deathly Hallows had not diminished in the slightest.
I'm close.
Though his search for the Cloak of Invisibility and the Resurrection Stone had ended in failure, unsettling whispers suggested that the Dark Wizard had managed to seize what many considered the most powerful magical artifact ever conceived, the Elder Wand.
The Elder Wand.
According to the reconstruction of events Albus had pieced together, Mikhail Grigorovich, a renowned yet controversial wandmaker from Eastern Europe, whose reputation rivaled that of the Ollivanders, had spread word that he had come into possession of a wand of extraordinary power. Though the Elder Wand was dismissed by many as little more than a cautionary children's tale, it did not take Dumbledore long to suspect that perhaps, after centuries, the infamous Deathly Hallow had been found once more. The trail of the Elder Wand faded into the depths of medieval history.
The first well-documented mention of a wand made of elder that had particularly strong and dangerous powers was owned by Emmerich, commonly called the Evil, a short-lived but exceptionally aggressive wizard who terrorized the south of England in the early Middle Ages.
After being claimed by Emmerich the Evil, the Deathly Hallow passed into the hands of Egbert the Egregious, who managed to defeat the dark and terrible wizard, only to be defeated himself by Godolo. Known primarily for writing Magic Moster Evil, one of the most dangerous texts on the dark arts, he was eventually murdered by none other than his own son, Hereward. And with Hereward, all traces of the Elder Wand vanished, dissolving into superstition and legend, until Mikiu Grigorovich became its new master. But the wizard had proven to be decidedly short-sighted. Perhaps to boost the business and reputation of his workshop, perhaps, as some suggest, to find assistance to help him in his ambitious attempt to replicate the properties of the prodigious wand, or perhaps out of sheer, naive foolishness. The news spread as swiftly as dragonpox. And so it was that one night, a blonde-haired demon slipped into the shadows of his workshop, leaving Grigorovich unconscious on the ground, and finally feeling, after so many years, the object of his long search, pulsing with vibrant power in the palm of his hand. Gellert Grindelwald had claimed the Elder Wand. Of that, Albus Dumbledore had no doubt. The revolution for the greater good, which would later be known as the Global Wizarding War, was now imminent. Despite Dumbledore's attempts to warn the wizarding world of the impending threat posed by Grindelwald, the British Ministry of Magic, led at the time by Hector Fawley, dismissed his concerns as unfounded alarmism. Unfortunately for all, it didn't take long for the Dark Wizard to catch the minister's attention. Through a series of devastating attacks across Europe, Grindelwald committed numerous mass murders, atrocities that even the Muggle world couldn't ignore, risking the exposure of magic and consequently, war. In a remarkably short time, the Dark Wizard had drawn the attention of magical authorities worldwide, becoming the most wanted criminal on the planet. The pressure from Aurors was enough to temporarily halt Grindelwald's revolution, forcing him to disappear, waiting for the waters to calm, waiting for his ultimate return.
Do not be fooled.
In the years that followed, Grindelwald's plans grew ever darker and more intricate. What we do know is that Dumbledore, convinced that the Dark Wizard's sudden disappearance was nothing but a temporary ruse, never found the courage to act directly and confront his former friend. Was Albus afraid of him? Possibly. Despite the disagreements among historians regarding many events, they all agree on one thing. While it is likely that Dumbledore feared facing Grindelwald because of their shared past, it is equally true that the only wizard Grindelwald ever feared was Albus Dumbledore. Both were wizards of exceptional skill, brilliance, and mastery. Both too powerful. Both bound by a past they could never fully set aside. For these reasons, it is said that Albus sought the help of one of his most gifted former students, Newt Scamander. By then, Newt had become a renowned magizoologist, working for the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures at the Ministry of Magic in London. His work had taken him across the globe, seeking out and rescuing magical creatures from the hands of his fellow wizards, whether from greedy poachers looking to profit from their rare qualities, or from those who viewed these beings as a threat to the statute of secrecy. His help proved crucial when, in New York, it was discovered that Grindelwald had been secretly infiltrating the upper ranks of the Magical Congress of the United States of America through human transfiguration. This deception led to the unleashing of an Obscurus, resulting in a disaster of unprecedented scale. Though the Dark Wizard was captured and imprisoned, he managed to escape just 6 months later, during the transfer orchestrated by British Aurors, who had arrived to escort him to Azkaban. The aftermath of Gellert Grindelwald's escape set off a chain of events that rippled from Paris to Berlin, shaking the established order and spreading his ideology with increasing fervor. Each day, more witches and wizards fell under his influence, captivated by his vision of a world where magical beings would no longer conceal themselves from muggles, but instead rule over them.
The time has come.
By 1935, the Muggle world was approaching a point of no return. While the United States remained trapped in the throes of the Great Depression, Europe, still scarred by the devastation of the First World War just 17 years prior, was caught in a storm of rising tensions and radical political shifts. Nazi Germany, under the leadership of Adolf Hitler since 1933, was solidifying its power, paving the way for the second great global conflict that would erupt just 4 years later. Such tension could not go unnoticed by the wizarding world, which began to see in Gellert Grindelwald a leader, extreme yet just, perhaps the only one capable of bringing peace and forging a new balance between the two worlds. The prophecy he had shared through his mastery of divination had shaken the very foundations of the magical community, stirring a wave of resentment toward muggles not seen since the Dark Ages. Grindelwald's vision spoke of a weapon of mass destruction, so devastating that it would surpass even the darkest of magical curses. The Muggle world would come to know it as the atomic bomb. Such a future was never meant to come to pass. And so, the war finally erupted, transforming the wizarding world after centuries of fragile peace into a blood-stained battlefield, a relentless, unending genocide. Years went by. Just as Grindelwald had foreseen, the Second World War had erupted in the Muggle world, unleashing a wave of death and devastation unparalleled in the history of humanity. Despite Dumbledore's numerous attempts over the years to prevent the Dark Wizard's definitive rise to power, the British Ministry of Magic and the Aura Department never fully supported or trusted the Hogwarts professor's plans. Despite his proven abilities, there were growing suspicions that Dumbledore himself had been compromised long ago, secretly collaborating with Grindelwald to facilitate his ascent. Although this suspicion was never made public, the higher ranks of the ministry had become aware of the deep bond that had once tied the two wizards together. To their eyes, the anti-Muggle ideology of Dumbledore's father, Percival, who had spent his final years in Azkaban, only reinforced their doubts. However, things took a different turn in 1939. Fearing that the alliances of the wizarding world, particularly those in America, France, and Germany, were losing the war, the magical community found itself desperately seeking more decisive support. 12 years after the rally that marked Grindelwald's rise, the complacent British Minister for Magic, Hector Fawley, was ousted from his office for his failure to implement effective security measures in Great Britain. He was succeeded by the more proactive Leonard Spencer Moon, a capable and strategic leader amid the growing international crisis, who maintained direct contact with the Muggle Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, to ensure the highest level of protection for the country. It was an August day like any other in those dark years of war, when Albus Dumbledore, no longer the Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts, but a professor of Transfiguration, was informed by Headmaster Armando Dippet that the Ministry of Magic had identified an 11-year-old half-blood wizard, unaware of his heritage. As was customary, he needed to be assessed, informed, and guided in preparation for his imminent admission to the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. The boy's name was Tom Riddle. And so Albus made his way to London, to Wool's Orphanage, where he would unexpectedly face one of the most pivotal encounters of his entire life. Despite Mrs. Cole's warnings about the boy's troubling behavior, the wizard remained skeptical. His intuition told him that before him stood a young wizard whose latent power was something exceptionally rare. Despite learning of Tom's peculiar ability to speak Parseltongue, a rare gift typically associated with dark wizards, Albus did not immediately see it as a sign of danger. No, it was something else. Something in Tom's eyes. A gaze that pierced through the wizard's very core, betraying a natural instinct for cruelty, secrecy, and domination. It was a look that reminded Albus unsettlingly of the darkest side of someone he had once loved. What was the connection between young Tom Riddle and Gellert Grindelwald? That day, a disturbing feeling took hold of Albus Dumbledore. A feeling that, perhaps, never truly left him. As expected, the boy proved to be as talented as he was brilliant at Hogwarts. Perhaps the most gifted student since a young Albus Dumbledore. Though the Transfiguration Professor had kept a close watch on the young Slytherin over the years, he couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of guilt about it. Beyond the walls of Hogwarts, past the mist-covered Scottish Highlands, the global wizarding world raged on, more ruthless than ever. What if his suspicions about Riddle were merely a reflection of his own failure? His inability, after all those years, to confront Grindelwald openly and put an end to it all. It was 1942 when Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry faced one of the darkest and most tragic moments in its history. The Chamber of Secrets had been opened.
Reliable historical sources tell us this much, but these honest facts have been obscured by the fanciful legend of the Chamber of Secrets. The story goes that Slytherin had built a hidden chamber in the castle, of which the other founders knew nothing. Slytherin, according to the legend, sealed the Chamber of Secrets so that none would be able to open it until his own true heir arrived at the school. The heir alone would be able to unseal the Chamber of Secrets, unleash the horror within, and use it to purge the school of all who were unworthy to study magic.
Many students, half-bloods and muggle-borns, were petrified by the piercing gaze of a basilisk, awakened from the depths of the chamber. Last among them was young Myrtle Warren, a Ravenclaw whose lifeless body was found in the girls' bathroom. If a basilisk had been summoned and controlled, only the heir of Salazar Slytherin could have achieved such a feat. And what if it had been Tom Riddle? Dumbledore couldn't shake the conviction, yet his evidence at the time was fragile, and the blood spilled within the castle seemed to him only a reflection of the horrors echoing beyond its walls, amidst the cries of war. Perhaps the heir of Slytherin, whoever they were, would have to wait. Perhaps it was time to face the inevitable. There was no turning back. Dumbledore understood that the time had come to face his destiny and confront the shadows of his past once and for all.
No more waiting.
What was the purpose of all those years spent mastering magic? The unmatched skill with a wand, if they could not summon the courage to confront his deepest fears, to save the entire wizarding world. The time for cowardice had finally run out, its last second ticking away into silence.
While I busied myself with the training of young wizards, Grindelwald was raising an army. They say he feared me, and perhaps he did, but less, I think, than I feared him. It was the truth I feared. You see, I never knew which of us, in that last horrific fight, had actually cast the curse that killed my sister. I think he knew it. I think he knew what frightened me. I delayed meeting him until finally it would have been too shameful to resist any longer. People were dying and he seemed unstoppable, and I had to do what I could.
And so, 1945 arrived. Against all odds, the Second World War in the Muggle world had finally reached its end, bringing a long-awaited peace that many had scarcely dared to hope for. Alongside it, the power of Gellert Grindelwald and the fervent support of the magical community began to wane, slowly but inevitably. The long-anticipated duel, the one remembered in every history book as perhaps the greatest magical duel ever fought, was about to begin. To this day, many details about where and how Albus Dumbledore and Gellert Grindelwald, after so many years, finally faced each other, remain shrouded in mystery. What is known is that both of them fought with the full extent of their powers, unleashing a tapestry of spells of unmatched mastery and complexity. There is no definitive account of how the duel truly unfolded, yet over the years, historians have proposed a version of events that appears more credible than others. one that begins with a crucial question. As skilled and capable as he was, how could Albus Dumbledore have defeated a wizard of equal power who wielded the most formidable wand ever crafted in history? According to this theory, the Elder Wand does not automatically make its wielder the most powerful, but rather ensures that every spell cast is executed to perfection at its fullest possible power. However, Dumbledore was already an exceptional wizard, capable of casting spells with flawless precision. His mastery of magic is evident in his use of the disillusionment charm, so potent that it rendered him completely invisible. In light of this, possessing the Elder Wand would not have given him any additional advantage. It becomes clear then that the legendary duel between Grindelwald and Dumbledore was less a test of sheer magical skill and more a battle of endurance. At this point, two decisive factors come into play, shaping the outcome of their confrontation. In those days, the fire of the Dumbledore house had risen anew in Fawkes the Phoenix. Loyal to his friend and master, the bird became an invaluable ally against the Dark Wizard, a force capable of countering the might of the Death Stick. With his healing tears, Fawkes could mend Albus's wounds and sustain his limited strength against the seemingly boundless power of the Elder Wand. But there's more. According to many scholars of magic, it is believed that the Elder Wand can only reach its fullest potential when the caster's intent is clear and resolute. In the case of offensive magic, much like an unforgivable curse, the intent must be lethal and merciless. But what if Grindelwald, after all, still harbored feelings for his greatest friend, the one with whom he had once shared dreams, ambitions, ideals, and love?
For the greater good.
Gellert Grindelwald fell, and his reign of terror came to an end. The global wizarding war, after more than 20 years, was truly over. The Dark Wizard was transferred to the magical authorities of Northern Europe, who, after a harsh trial for war crimes, sentenced Grindelwald to life imprisonment. His cell would be the highest and most isolated in Nurmengard, the fortress prison he himself had built amid the Austrian Alps to serve his war efforts, a place where he had once imprisoned all who dared to oppose him. The surviving acolytes were disbanded. Some faced trial and were properly convicted, while others vanished without a trace, never to be seen or heard from again. At the same time, having triumphed in the duel, Albus Dumbledore's fame was cemented worldwide. Minister Moon honored him with the prestigious Order of Merlin First Class, and he became universally regarded as the greatest wizard of modern times, a title and the weight of a tremendous responsibility towards the entire wizarding world. Albus understood this all too well by now. The mighty Elder Wand rested firmly in his grip, ready to obey its new master, or, as he saw it, its new guardian. For possessing the Death Stick meant safeguarding a power too great to be truly controlled, an artifact that, if it were to fall into the wrong hands, could once again shatter the delicate balance of the world. Perhaps, wherever she was now, his sister Ariana might finally forgive him. Perhaps.
Thank you.
At Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Armando Dippett's tenure came to an end, and so Albus Dumbledore became the headmaster we all know, arguably the greatest the school had ever seen. Beyond the castle's towers, beyond the clouds, the sky seemed at last ready to clear. And yet, there was that feeling, that unsettling sense that refused to fade. The young Tom Riddle, who could say, perhaps one day, time would reveal the truth more clearly. For now, it was just worth enjoying a tasty sherbet lemon.
Of choices, cats, and love.
On the 4th of October, many years ago, in a small village near Caithness, in the Scottish Highlands, the stillness gave way to the sound of raised voices and hurried footsteps. A child had been born. Her name was Minerva. She was the first daughter of Robert McGonagall, a Presbyterian minister of stern conviction, and Isabel Ross, a witch who had set aside her wand for love and learned to pass unnoticed in a world that would never have understood her. The child was named in honor of a grandmother she would never meet, a witch remembered in family stories as a woman of extraordinary magical strength. Robert accepted the choice with quiet uncertainty, noticing the glassy brightness in his wife's eyes, where lay memories he did not share. Memories of the wizarding world, of her youth at Hogwarts, of the strict teachings she had received from her own mother. It was something Isabel had chosen to set aside for love, and something she knew Robert, devoted as he was to his faith, would never truly understand.
He wouldn't understand.
The birth of Minerva, however, would become the first, almost imperceptible crack in a balance that had seemed carefully preserved. The girl carried magic in her cradle. It stirred like an old, restless intelligence inside her. Isabel felt her heart tighten each time an object drifted quietly from a high shelf toward the child's reaching hands. Robert's bagpipes began to play by themselves one afternoon, releasing a wandering melody that seemed to drift through the house without source or touch. A heavy, aging family cat followed Minerva everywhere, settling beside the cradle with the patience of a guardian. It purred whenever the child moved her fingers or spoke in the broken rhythm of infant sounds, as if it understood her better than any other creature could have done. Faced with such events, Isabel spent long afternoons alone with Minerva, protecting the child's small miracles from Robert's gaze, but also finding in those quiet hours the freedom to be herself again. She told the girls stories of the old world, Merlin confronting Morgan Le Fay, and the tales of Beedle the Bard. Yet deep inside, Isabel knew the truth could not remain hidden forever. It should not. She loved Robert as he loved her, and for the sake of their bond and for the future of little Minerva, the secret had to be spoken.
I'm a witch.
She told Robert about her nature, about the world that moved beneath ordinary sight, about the laws of secrecy that bound witches and wizards across Britain. Silence was his first response. The heart of the Muggle man did not falter before love for his wife and daughter. The truth did not destroy the marriage, but it placed a thin, invisible distance between them, one that Minerva sensed even as a child. The years passed. The girl continued learning the rudiments of magic from her mother, yet found herself growing unexpectedly closer to her father. Robert's temperament carried the patience of his ministry and the stern softness of Highland life. Minerva watched him study his sermons by lamplight, learning the architecture of his thought, his inclination to order, to listen before speaking, to hold emotion quietly beneath measured words. Two younger brothers followed her into the world. Malcolm and Robert Jr. were born after the revelation, and both would eventually manifest magical ability as they grew older. By then, Isabel and young Minerva had become adept at concealing the boy's accidental magic from Robert's Muggle eyes, carefully undoing small enchantments before he returned home, sparing him the embarrassment he would have felt at what he might have perceived as his own inadequacy. The exercise amused Minerva, though she would never have said it aloud. On her 11th birthday, the letter arrived. It bore the seal of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, then headed by Professor Armando Dippet, carrying with it the invitation to embrace a destiny that waited patiently for every child born into magic. Minerva traveled with her mother to Diagon Alley, where she was chosen by a wand measuring 9.5 inches, fashioned from fur with a dragon heartstring core, a combination considered powerful by her mother. Fur wands are said to favor determination and a stern clarity of purpose, responding best to those who carry strong convictions. Dragon heartstring cores are known for power and loyalty, but also for spells that burn brightly and demand discipline. Although she had already learned to mask her emotions, the girl felt a restless excitement at the thought of beginning a new life among her own kind. She watched her mother cry that September day. Pride lived inside those tears, but Minerva also sensed a faint shadow of melancholy envy, the quiet ache of a road that had been taken and another that had been closed forever. Perhaps it was then that she understood, without yet knowing how to name it, the meaning of the path that had chosen her, and the weight of the future that was already waiting inside the stone corridors of a castle she had never seen. On the evening of her arrival at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, her heart lodged somewhere between awe and disbelief at such magnificence. Minerva could not have imagined that she was about to face a decision of lasting consequence, the kind that shapes a life in ways one only understands much later. At the ceremony, the Sorting Hat needed only a moment to recognize how intricate and layered the young witch's mind truly was. It lingered for 5.5 minutes, wrestling with its judgment, which made Minerva unmistakably a hat stall, a rare student whose qualities align so precisely with more than one house that the hat itself is forced into prolonged deliberation. It is said that a true hat stall appears roughly once every half-century.
So,
The hat murmured softly into her ear.
where shall I place you?
Minerva was brave.
You're brave.
That much was certain.
Yes.
Gryffindor House is described as the House of Courage. Yet courage, for Minerva, was not the explosive bravery of recklessness. She understood it as the willingness to uphold conviction when conviction proved inconvenient, when it required standing openly rather than retreating into the safer refuge of thought. Ravenclaw House would have offered her a different path, a life shaped by curiosity expressed through observation, by knowledge pursued for its own sake, by thought unfolding with the precision of a carefully constructed proof. Minerva possessed those qualities, but she carried something more. The child sensed within herself a gravity that inclined toward action rather than contemplation alone, a belief that knowledge, once gained, demanded responsibility. Intelligence in her mind was never meant to hover in abstraction. Perhaps it was the balance of a character forged from both her parents. Her father's solemn composure and reflective restraint, certainly. Yet also, though less visible in daylight, the fierce, impetuous fire of her mother, Isabel. In the end, Gryffindor was chosen, and the Great Hall erupted into thunderous applause. Many years later, some would notice echoes of the young Minerva in Hermione Granger, whose analytical brilliance was fueled by an uncompromising sense of justice. From her very first year, McGonagall demonstrated exceptional talent and a formidable discipline in her studies, quickly earning a reputation as the most brilliant witch of her year.
Nicely done.
Among all subjects, it was in charms, and even more so in transfiguration, that Minerva revealed the full measure of her gift, displaying a rare balance between control and instinct, a quality that soon drew the particular attention of Professor Albus Dumbledore, who at the time served as her transfiguration teacher. It was under his meticulous guidance and quiet protection that during her student years, Minerva chose to test the limits of her ability by undertaking the long and demanding process that would lead her to become an animagus, her status duly and immediately registered by the Ministry of Magic. Her transformation took the form of a tabby cat, mirroring the Patronus that would later emerge from her wand. Perhaps there lingered within that shape a trace of nostalgia for the old family cat of the McGonagall household, her steadfast companion and guardian throughout her childhood. Among Minerva's many talents, even Quidditch found its place. The sport came naturally to her, and she secured more than a few victories for Gryffindor House during her student years, likely playing as Seeker, though no official record confirms the position. A less pleasant memory, however, belongs to her final year, a vicious fall during the decisive Gryffindor versus Slytherin house match that would determine the cup winner. A foul sent her crashing to the ground. She suffered a concussion and several broken ribs, and carried from that day forward a quiet, enduring desire to see Slytherin defeated on the Quidditch pitch whenever fate allowed it. For a couple of years, her time at Hogwarts overlapped with that of the younger Pomona Sprout, a warm-hearted and spirited Hufflepuff to whom Minerva gifted a fanged geranium to ease her homesickness. Pomona named the plant Gerald, and in time it grew ever more lush and vigorous, flourishing alongside the friendship cultivated between the two witches, a bond that would endure well into their adult lives. By the end of her education, Minerva's record had become a subject of admiration among professors and students alike. She earned top marks in both ordinary wizarding levels and nastily exhausting wizarding tests, was appointed prefect, and later head girl, and received the Transfiguration Today Most Promising Newcomer Award. And now, as her brilliant years as a student drew to a close, what future awaited her? Even the perceptive Minerva had not yet found an answer to that question.
What's next?
Only a few days after leaving the ancient towers of Hogwarts behind her, Minerva was offered a position within the Ministry of Magic in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, an appointment that spoke plainly of the esteem in which she was already held. And yet, in the quiet of her own heart, something resisted. She could not have named it, a hesitation without shape. Perhaps one last summer at home, among her family, her meadows and her mountains, was what she required before deciding the course of her future. So she returned to the broad, familiar skies of Caithness, where fate, with patient certainty, would place before her a choice both profound and irrevocable. It was on a pale morning in July, having gone to the Muggle market to purchase provisions, that she met Dougal MacGregor. He was the son of a local farmer, handsome in the simple way of men shaped by wind and soil, clever, with a quick, cutting humor capable of unsettling even her most disciplined composure. At the sound of his voice, Minerva felt a warmth unfurl within her, tinged with something almost sorrowful, as though it had been waiting for him long before they met. And there was something else, perhaps the faint impression that he sensed another side of her, another Minerva, a depth he would likely spend a lifetime trying and failing to define. They argued often about books, about faith, about the future of Scotland, and on one memorable afternoon, about whether apple, plum, or raspberry made the superior jam. Their disagreements carried a curious charge. The young witch, who had always worn her composure like armor, felt it loosening day by day. Those were happy weeks, among the happiest she would ever know. For the first and only time in her life, she yielded entirely to her feelings. When Dougal proposed, it was in a plowed field beneath an open sky, the earth still dark and fragrant at their feet. The gesture was simple, as was the question that left his lips, and the young McGonagall, her heart rising to her throat, gave an answer just as simple.
Dougal.
She accepted.
Yes.
Yet sleep did not visit her that night. The old cat, her childhood companion, watched her from the foot of the bed with wide, unblinking eyes, as though awaiting a revelation from its mistress, one she herself had yet to grasp. Perhaps Dougal's question had not been as simple as it first appeared. If so, neither could her answer be. With painful clarity, Minerva understood what marriage to a Muggle ignorant of her true nature would demand. A wand hidden away in drawers, a life divided cleanly down the center. She had watched her mother live that choice every day of her life. Isabel's love for Robert had been real. The cost of pretending to be something she was not had been equally real. Before dawn, Minerva made her decision. She could offer Dougal no explanation that would satisfy him. To speak the truth would have violated the international statute of secrecy that governed her world, jeopardizing the very ministry position for which she was now sacrificing everything. A post earned through her talent, through what she was in her most authentic form. A witch of rare ability and fierce integrity, a heart worthy of Godric Gryffindor. 3 days later, she departed for London. By then, her composure had returned, settled once more upon her features like polished stone. Only a single tear marked its passing.
I'm sorry.
Of London, lessons, and tea.
The month she spent in London carried the weight of a city that never quite slept. Though she continued to serve with remarkable efficiency within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Minerva found little comfort among colleagues whose opinions were often shaped by an ingrained suspicion of Muggle society. The prejudice troubled her more than she allowed herself to show. London itself felt distant from the Highlands. The air seemed heavier, pressed down by stone and human noise, rather than the wind moving freely across open hills. Her direct superior during this period was Elphinstone Urquhart, an older wizard whose temperament was measured and courteous. Urquhart respected her ability, and over time developed a quiet fondness for the young witch, whose seriousness masked a sharp and unexpectedly dry sense of humor. After 2 years of service, a promotion was offered. It was a position many young witches and wizards would have considered the culmination of their ambition. The opportunity carried prestige, influence, and a path deeper into the administrative heart of magical Britain. But Minerva declined. Deep in her heart, she knew that Scotland, her home, missed her more than she had ever expected. An owl arrived with the reply only a few hours after she sent her hopeful request. A teaching position at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, where the head of the Transfiguration Department, Albus Dumbledore, would take her on as his assistant. Minerva ruled her classroom with a stern patience that students quickly learned was not to be tested lightly. She believed knowledge demanded structure, and that magical talent without intellectual rigor was a dangerous and unstable thing. During these early years as a teacher, a letter arrived from her mother, Isabel. In the middle of recounting some village news, she mentioned almost casually that Dougal MacGregor had married the daughter of another farmer. That evening, Professor Dumbledore found her alone in the Transfiguration classroom, sitting in the darkness, where only the faint glow of the moon touched the wooden desks. The pain in her heart was too deep to spill easily into tears. But Albus understood. She needed to speak to someone about her story, without embellishment, and he did the same in return, sharing the grief of his own love and the weight of guilt carried toward his family. The sorrow of the confidences exchanged that night became the foundation of a friendship that would endure across decades, shaping both of them in ways neither would later attempt to measure. Over time, although it never disappeared completely, the weight in Minerva's heart gradually softened, helped in part by her love for Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and for teaching. During those years, her old superior at the ministry, Elphinstone Urquhart, who had grown fond of her, wrote to her regularly and visited Scotland from time to time. Minerva would never have imagined that Elphinstone's intentions were more serious than simple friendship. The wizard proposed marriage to her during a quiet afternoon at Madame Puddifoot's tea shop, and many proposals followed after that. Minerva declined each time, and yet their correspondence continued. There was goodness in Elphinstone, a simplicity and kindness that seemed increasingly rare. Perhaps with the passing of years, the witch came to understand that good companionship and mutual trust are gifts large enough to set aside the memory of an old love without erasing it. Finally, during a walk beside the shores of the Great Lake at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Minerva accepted Elphinstone's proposal. Together, they purchased a small cottage in Hogsmeade. When she was not teaching, she lived there, surrounded by the slow rhythm of village life and the distant sound of students laughing across the castle grounds, visible from certain high windows. Sadly, their marriage lasted only 3 years. Elphinstone Urquhart died after an accidental encounter with a venomous tentacula, a plant whose bite carries lethal venom even for experienced wizards. The loss struck Minerva once more, but this time it was different. This time she knew she had lived those years fully beside Elphinstone, feeling only profound gratitude for what had been, and carrying the memory forward without regret. Meanwhile, her academic career continued to rise. Following the appointment of Headmaster Albus Dumbledore, Minerva became head of the Transfiguration Department, devoting herself entirely to teaching. Her classes were famously demanding. students were pushed to explore the limits of their ability through rigorous study, under lessons that required precision, discipline, and an uncompromising respect for the subtle logic of transformation magic. In time, she would be appointed deputy headmistress of the school, yet the title she carried closest to her heart was that of head of Gryffindor House, perhaps the role she fulfilled with the deepest sense of pride.
Of loss, heritage, and Gryffindor.
But even within the walls of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, the day eventually came when the noise of war could no longer remain outside. Despite the chaos and destruction brought by Lord Voldemort and his followers, Minerva continued teaching at Hogwarts, carrying the war quietly within a life that, on the surface, still revolved around lectures, the correction of homework, and the patient discipline of young minds. Although her admiration for the Order of the Phoenix was undeniable, even if at the time it was considered by many authorities to be politically reckless, and although Albus Dumbledore would have welcomed her into the group without hesitation, the witch felt she had to fight the war in her own way. She would do her part, but not on the front line. Unbeknownst to her students, she spent many nights wandering the corridors of the wizarding world in her animagus form, a tabby cat moving silently through the darkest shadows, gathering fragments of information and observing the movements of Death Eaters. What she learned was carried only to those she trusted, among them her brother Robert McGonagall Jr., who did not hesitate to openly stand against the Dark Lord. That choice would ultimately cost him his life. The same fate befell her first love, Dougal McGregor, who was murdered alongside his family in a random anti-Muggle attack carried out by Voldemort's supporters. For a long time, she wondered whether history might have unfolded differently had she accepted his proposal all those years earlier. Whether love, once abandoned, carries a strange and irreversible kind of mathematics, where every lost possibility continues to exist somewhere beyond the reach of decision. But war does not allow the luxury of rewriting the past. Even in that endless slaughter, none of those she had once counted among her most promising and beloved students were spared. James Potter and Lily Evans had both fallen after years of courageous struggle. But their son, little Harry, survived. It was he who brought the war to its end. With the return of peace to the wizarding world, as Vice Headmistress beside Albus Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall devoted herself to restoring what war had taken from the students. The headmaster's plans were often intricate, unfolding like a labyrinth of intentions, only partially visible to her, though she trusted the moral direction that guided them. Years later, when the young Harry Potter walked the corridors of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Minerva found herself watching him with a careful, almost unconscious attention. He reminded her of his father, James Potter, the sharpness of James' defiance, the restless energy that seemed ready to turn any classroom into a battlefield if given the chance. She tried not to let the resemblance influence her judgment, yet she could not deny the instinct to keep the boy close, to protect him with a discretion not typically associated with Gryffindor courage. Though it was certainly not absent in Minerva, it was she who suggested him as a seeker to Oliver Wood, believing that the boy carried both the reflexes and the courage required for the sport, just as James had before him, just as she had before James. When darkness was poised to return 5 years later, with the death of Albus Dumbledore and the final rise of Lord Voldemort, every certainty seemed to falter. But not Minerva's determination, and she chose to remain at Hogwarts, long since the only place she truly considered home. The castle needed her as much as the students did. While Severus Snape was appointed headmaster and the Carrow siblings, Death Eaters, were granted authority over school discipline, Minerva worked in secret to protect the children as best she could, ensuring the survival of the student resistance, known as Dumbledore's army.
Professor.
During the Battle of Hogwarts, her deeds were essential to the protection of the castle. Her magic revealed the full depth of what decades of discipline had forged. Spells answered her with the precision of a language She had studied all her life, showing the full courage of a Gryffindor while pouring into the enemy the weight of a lifetime's repressed sorrow. After the final defeat of Voldemort, she was awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class, by Minister for Magic Kingsley Shacklebolt for her loyalty to the Order of the Phoenix during the war. Her image was later immortalized on a chocolate frog card, an honor she would later admit she had never imagined receiving. 4 months after the battle, once the castle had been repaired and the protective enchantments restored, Minerva was appointed headmistress of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and, after a private conversation with Harry Potter, Minerva made the controversial decision to place Severus Snape's portrait in her office gallery, recognizing the complicated truth of his allegiance during the war. In the years that followed, she devoted herself to the renewal of the school. New professors were hired to replace those lost in battle. A permanent defense against the dark arts instructor was eventually appointed after the ancient curse that had long haunted the position was broken, and she welcomed Neville Longbottom into the herbology department after his work as an Auror, placing him under the leadership of her friend Pomona Sprout, whom he would later succeed as professor of herbology before becoming head of Gryffindor House. As the years moved forward, the castle's corridors grew older with her. Minerva continued teaching Transfiguration for many years while serving as headmistress, eventually retiring from the classroom only in the later decades of her life. In the evenings, before sleep would claim her, she often found her thoughts returning to her old cat, imagining once more the quiet conversations they had shared in younger days. Are you content with the years you have lived, with the choices you have made? The cat would ask. The question of what it truly meant to be a Gryffindor lingered quietly beneath the surface of her thoughts. The house had never been defined for her by the noise of battle or the celebration of victory alone. Courage, as she had come to understand it, was closer to a patient refusal to surrender one's moral ground when the world grew uncertain. It was the discipline of standing firm when fear spoke softly, persistently, inside the mind. The legacy of Godric Gryffindor lived inside that definition, present in every important choice of her life, from the sorting ceremony to the renunciation of the love of her life in order to remain faithful to herself. For Minerva, being a Gryffindor meant understanding that true courage is the willingness to choose what one knows to be right, especially when that choice is the most difficult one.
Of clumsiness, spiders, and expulsion.
In the West Country of England, where the land softens into ancient woodland and the air seems to hold on to older stories, a slight wizard known only to a few as Mr. Hagrid lived a quiet life at the margins of the wizarding world. Unfortunately, very little is known about his life up to that point, though a few things can be pieced together. For instance, it is highly likely that Mr. Hagrid had attended the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and that he was, by all accounts, a great admirer of the famed magizoologist Newt Scamander. In fact, much like Scamander himself, Mr. Hagrid appears to have been a scholar of fantastic beasts. Others tell a different story, portraying him more as an eccentric student of alchemy, obsessed with the writings of Nicholas Flamel. What is certain, however, is that, unlike both Flamel and Scamander, Hagrid's name carried little to no recognition. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say none at all, and it did not seem to trouble him in the slightest. He preferred the intimacy of his work, far removed from the noisy chatter of people and from the chaos that the dark wizard Gellert Grindelwald had by then spread across the continent and beyond. For some time, his studies had led Mr. Hagrid into the Forest of Dean, where sightings of rare beasts were often reported and just as often dismissed. It was there, among roots and shadowed undergrowth, that he began to notice something else. Disturbances in the pattern of the forest, trees broken at heights too great for any known animal, ground pressed into impressions far larger than any human step.
Something's wrong.
For weeks, he followed them deeper into the woodland until the forest stopped pretending. And so at last he saw her, a giantess moving between the trees, as though the forest had been arranged around her rather than the other way round. Her name, he would later learn, was Fridwulfa. Most would have fled. Hagrid did not, because one thing above all was clear to him. The giantess was bleeding, in pain, and the wizard, carefully, helped her. He treated the injury as best he could, returning to her more than once, always at the same place in the forest. Over time, the threat in her presence dulled into something quieter. She did not welcome him, but she allowed him to remain, and little by little, a bond began to form, not spoken, not defined, simply lived in repeated encounters beneath the canopy of the Forest of Dean. And then, as these things sometimes happen in the hidden corners of the world, something new entered their lives, a child. He was born of two worlds that did not naturally belong together. His father held him with a kind of stunned reverence, as though unsure how something so unlikely could exist in his hands and still be real, and he would name him Rubeus. In Latin it means red, but to Mr. Hagrid it meant far more than that. The rubedo, according to the principles of alchemy set forth by Nicholas Flamel, the final stage of the great work. The red phase, following the negredo and the albedo. The moment in which all transmutations find their end, and base matter is brought to completion. Red was considered by alchemists to stand between white and black, between light and darkness. And the rubedo marked the reconciliation of opposites, the closing of the circle. A union of two worlds that were never meant to become one, that of the wizard Hagrid and the giantess Fridwulfa. From his earliest years, Rubeus Hagrid did not fit within the bounds of ordinary childhood. Objects broke too easily in his hands. Doorways seemed to tighten around him. And yet, within the small home at the edge of the Forest of Dean, none of it was seen as a flaw. Mr. Hagrid raised Rubeus with love, even when the child became too strong for his age, too large for his years. He would only smile at the uniqueness of his son.
Do not be ashamed of what you are,
he would say. Fridwulfa, however, could not look at the child through anything other than the eyes of a giant, eyes capable only of seeing a small, fragile creature, too small, too breakable. She remained cold, distant, and silent, until, when Rubeus was 3, she left. One day she was there, the next she was not. A wound the child carried without understanding, but one that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Too small for a giant, too large for a human, and always the same unspoken question. What was the half-giant Rubeus Hagrid meant to be? Fridwulfa, he would discover many years later, had returned to the mountains, to those of her own kind, leaving the world of men behind once and for all. In the years that followed, Rubeus grew quickly, faster than anyone could easily explain. But within him also grew a sensitivity to what others ignore. Thanks to his father and a love for nature, the boy developed an instinct for the overlooked and for all those creatures feared or despised. With the passing of days and seasons, however, a quiet concern began to form in his father. Rubeus was close to 10, and still, magic had not revealed itself in him. No sparks, no levitation, nothing out of the ordinary beyond his size and strength. What if he never became a wizard? Mr. Hagrid personally did not care, but as he grew older, he knew it would matter to Rubeus. The answer to that question came by owl that same year. A letter of admission to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. And so the boy understood that there was a special place waiting for him. A place for him where perhaps he could finally find his own place in the world. And for young Rubeus Hagrid, that was enough. Enough to burst with joy and lift his old father clean off the ground, carrying him on his shoulders, a moment whose memory would remain with him for the rest of his life. It was the autumn of 1940, with the wizarding world already engulfed in war, when the young Hagrid first crossed the threshold of the place he would one day call home. During the sorting ceremony, The hat hesitated a moment longer than usual, perhaps intrigued by the singular nature of the boy before it. Worlds that seemed so distant, converging within him, and yet a striking simplicity, a kind of courage that required no explanation. In the end, there were few doubts left for the hat. Lessons began, and with them, it quickly became clear that magic was something not so natural for the young Hagrid. What his classmates managed with ease required from him a greater effort, with wand movements always a little clumsy, as if the connection between intent and execution refused to align. With theoretical subjects, things were no better. Long passages of magical lore and historical precedent slipped through his memory almost as soon as he read them. It did not take long for Rubeus to become an easy target for Slytherin laughter. So large, so awkward in movement. What on earth was someone like him doing at Hogwarts? Many would ask themselves. And yet, just as some could not fail to notice something else in Hagrid, a gentleness, a kind of innocence toward the world, eyes carrying a rare ability to see the better side of everything, a good heart, perhaps too good a heart, a quality that the then Transfiguration Professor, Albus Dumbledore, valued far more than magical dexterity. If Rubeus struggled in potions and charms, the situation was very different in herbology, but even more so in care of magical creatures, where the young Gryffindor excelled from the very first lesson.
Well done, Mr. Hagrid.
Perhaps through something inherited from his father, or perhaps through the natural disposition he had carried since childhood, Hagrid seemed able to communicate with creatures better than any other student, perhaps even better than his own teachers. During those lessons, the young Gryffindor discovered the existence of beasts that surpassed anything he had ever imagined. Fire crabs, three-headed dogs, centaurs, and dragons. Oh, how many kinds of dragons there were. Hebridean black, Hungarian horntail, Romanian longhorn, Norwegian ridgeback. Just thinking about their sheer presence made Rubeus's eyes light up. One day, he would see them all. Of that, he was certain. Rubeus felt light-hearted in those days, lighter than he had been in a long while. But as so often happens, tragedy looms precisely when we are least willing to accept it, or even to comprehend it. It was an ordinary morning, during his second year at Hogwarts, when a letter brought him the news. Mr. Hagrid, his father, had lost his life. We cannot know with certainty what had happened. Perhaps an accident. Perhaps merely another victim of the tragic outbreak of dragon pox in those years. What is certain is that once again, after the abandonment of his mother Fridwulfa, Rubeus found himself alone. Alone as never before. But life, indifferent to grief, was forced to continue its own course.
I'm so sorry, Rubeus.
It was Hagrid's third year at Hogwarts when everything began to change. During one of the students' usual visits to Hogsmeade, he encountered a stranger. Very little is known about him, except that he was a man from distant lands, wrapped in travel-worn robes and speaking in half-finished stories. What is known for certain is that, from this stranger, young Rubeus received a gift, an egg of extraordinary size, from which sometime later a small and fragile creature would emerge. A young acromantula cub that the Gryffindor, with eyes filled with a love a mother might feel for her child, would name Aragog. Unsure how the other students or the professors would perceive his new friend, Hagrid decided it was best to keep him hidden in a forgotten cupboard in the dungeons of the castle.
You'll be safer here.
There, he fed it scraps, taken quietly from the feasts of the Great Hall, or on occasion, with treats that some elf would slip him from the kitchens. Hagrid visited little Aragog every day, and every evening he would say goodnight to him.
Sleep well,
No one knew,
me friend.
and for a time, nothing seemed to disturb that fragile secrecy, until the castle itself began to change. Students were found petrified in the corridors, which, little by little, were consumed by terror. The Chamber of Secrets cast its shadow over every corner of the school. According to legend, it was a place said to house a creature whose role was to cleanse the school of those deemed unworthy. And so, even the moment when such rumors ceased to be mere rumors, when Myrtle Warren, a Muggle-born student, was found lifeless, panic spread through the castle. In the utmost confusion, a young and brilliant Slytherin prefect took an interest in the matter. Respected by the professors and admired by the other students, precise in everything he did, the young Tom Riddle was, for all of Hogwarts, a point of reference. It did not take long for the Slytherin, intrigued by Hagrid's daily and suspicious descents into the dungeons, to discover Aragog's existence. A dangerous, venomous acromantula hidden within the castle, ready to claim the lives of the most unsuspecting students, or of Muggleborns. With Riddle's discovery, the culprit behind all those attacks was finally unmasked. Hagrid had unknowingly opened the Chamber of Secrets, unleashing the monster that dwelled within. It likely did not help Hagrid's case that he already carried a reputation for unpredictability. Rumors circulated easily at Hogwarts, and Riddle himself seemed more than willing to shape them. Whispers of a boy who tried to raise werewolf cubs beneath his bed, and who wandered into the Forbidden Forest to wrestle trolls with reckless enthusiasm. Whether true or grotesquely inflated, these stories clung to Hagrid like evidence, reinforcing the image of a careless boy playing with forces he could not control. Only many years later, the young Harry Potter, in his second year at Hogwarts, would discover that this version of events was far from the truth. But by then, the story had already been written.
My dear boy.
Only Albus Dumbledore seemed not to believe in Hagrid's guilt, and it was he who, once the accusations were made, managed to help Hagrid save Aragog before it was captured, allowing it to escape into the Forbidden Forest. If Tom Riddle was praised for his intuition, his service to the school, his ability to uncover what others had missed, the fate awaiting Hagrid was far more bitter. Although it was established that the young Gryffindor's intentions were neither malicious nor intentional, a student had lost her life, and Headmaster Dippet, under pressure from the Ministry, was forced to expel him. No possibility of appeal. His wand was snapped. The life of Rubeus Hagrid as a wizard, in some way, came to an end that day. But the course of events, at times, takes an unexpectedly different turn. Occurrences that at first glance seem tragic can later reveal themselves as both fatal and salvific. Albus Dumbledore, who at that point in history had not yet defeated Gellert Grindelwald in duel, and who would later become one of the greatest wizards history would remember, already enjoyed a reputation far above the ordinary. Therefore, at least in part, he managed to win his battle for the one he would consider one of the kindest people he had ever met in his life. Headmaster Dippet agreed to grant young Hagrid the possibility to remain at Hogwarts, not as a student, but as something different. The boy would begin a long and difficult apprenticeship, a unique and particular education, which in a sense would shape the person we all still remember today. Rubeus Hagrid, Keeper of Keys and Grounds at Hogwarts.
Of umbrellas, phoenixes, and motorcycles.
The years passed, and the Wizarding War, at last, had come to an end. Albus Dumbledore, following Armando Dippet, had taken his place as headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. After a long apprenticeship under the aging gamekeeper Og, now nearing retirement, Hagrid, having finally reached adulthood, was ready to assume the role for which he had been so carefully prepared. Alongside the quieter duties of daily life, opening the entrance gates to welcome visitors in and out of the school grounds, and escorting new students on their very first arrival at Hogwarts, there were also aspects of the role that carried a different kind of energy, such as regular patrols through the depths of the Forbidden Forest, ensuring that the flora and fauna of Hogwarts remained in balance, each following its natural course. On every journey, Hagrid carried with him a pink umbrella, through which he was once again able to perform magic. There is no official confirmation of its true nature, yet many have long suspected that the umbrella concealed something far more significant, that it was, in fact, the very wand that had once been snapped by the Ministry following his expulsion, repaired somehow. And in the known world, there exists only one wand capable of such magic, the Elder Wand. Once wielded by Gellert Grindelwald during the darkest years of the war, it had eventually passed into the hands of the man who defeated him, Albus Dumbledore. And so, with a ministry that was perhaps unaware, or perhaps simply willing to look the other way, Rubeus Hagrid was still, in his own way, a wizard. Not a skilled one, not a precise one, but a wizard nonetheless. And somewhere one might imagine his father would have been proud. They were, in their own quiet way, happy years. But as always, darkness finds a way to return. With the declaration of war against the entire wizarding world, when the Dark Lord's war reached its height, events began to unfold with unsettling speed. Hagrid, still marked by the tragedy that had followed the opening of the Chamber of Secrets, did not hesitate to join the Order of the Phoenix, an organization founded by Albus Dumbledore to oppose Lord Voldemort and his followers, never officially sanctioned by a ministry too fearful and too compromised to act with clarity or resolve. During those years, the Dark Lord gathered to his cause not only witches and wizards, but creatures of a darker nature as well, among them giants, something that struck Hagrid deeply. Young witches and wizards he had seen grow during his early years as gamekeeper, people he had come to know, to trust, members of the Order itself, began to fall, one after another, until that fateful night, the 31st of October, 1981. On that Halloween night, Lily Evans and James Potter lost their lives, but not their child. Harry survived, in a way no one could fully understand. The Dark Lord, rather than claiming victory, had fallen. Was the war truly over? Hagrid had no time to wonder. Dumbledore had entrusted him with a task of the utmost importance, perhaps the most important of his entire life. He made his way at once to Godric's Hollow, to the ruins of the Potter home, where he found a fellow member of the Order, as broken by grief as he was himself. Sirius Black, Harry's godfather. Sirius was reluctant to let the child go. He knew where the boy was to be taken. To Muggle relatives he did not trust, perhaps could never trust. But in the end, Hagrid managed to reassure him. He reminded Sirius that this had been Dumbledore's plan, and Dumbledore, more often than not, understood what others could not.
Take my motorbike,
Sirius said at last.
Go on. Get him somewhere safe. Fly.
And so Hagrid did. Mounted on that strange Muggle vehicle, altered through magic, he rose into the night sky with the child in his arms, carrying him away from the only home he had ever known, until at last he reached Privet Drive. Albus Dumbledore was waiting, and with him, Minerva McGonagall. A single tear fell from Hagrid's eyes. Would the boy be safe? Would he be cared for? For a moment he thought again of the words he had spoken to Sirius. Then, drawing a quiet breath, he chose to trust Dumbledore, as he always had, as Dumbledore, in turn, had always chosen to trust him. 10 years can pass more quickly than one might imagine. The small child Hagrid had once carried through the night had grown, and on the day he was sent once more to find him, this time to deliver his letter of admission to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Hagrid could not have felt prouder. Before him stood the son of James and Lily, ready to take the step that would finally make him a wizard in his own right.
Of stone, hippogriffs, and tournaments.
From that autumn onward, with Harry's arrival at the school, strange events seemed to follow in quick succession. In that very first year, Hagrid was entrusted with the transfer of the Philosopher's Stone from Vault 713 at Gringotts to Hogwarts, where it would be kept under the careful watch of Albus Dumbledore, who already suspected that Lord Voldemort might one day return. Drawing upon his knowledge of magical creatures, Hagrid arranged for a particularly unusual guardian. From Greece, he acquired a magnificent three-headed dog, whom he named Fluffy, and placed it at the trapdoor leading to the stone. It was, in its way, both a clever and a flawed solution. For all his strengths, Hagrid's trusting nature left him open to deception. And so it was that he revealed, to a mysterious stranger, the secret to calming the creature. A stranger who had first gained his trust by offering him yet another rare and dangerous gift. An egg. From it would hatch a Norwegian ridgeback, a dragon Hagrid would name Norbert, bringing with it no small amount of trouble for both him and the young Harry Potter. Only later would it become clear that the stranger in question had been Quirinius Quirrell, already consumed by the will of Voldemort, who had taken hold of him like a parasite. And once again, the Dark Lord was defeated, for a time. The following year, the Chamber of Secrets was opened once more, after nearly half a century, and once again, Muggle-born students were found petrified within the castle walls. The Ministry, proving itself once more unprepared in the face of a threat it neither understood nor wished to confront, turned its attention back to Hagrid. His past, never truly forgotten, made him an easy suspect. Even the word of Albus Dumbledore was not enough to prevent it. Hagrid was taken to Azkaban. There, he remained for a time, until Harry Potter, guided in part by Hagrid's own words, "Follow the spiders," uncovered the truth behind the attacks. Once again, it was Voldemort who stood at the center of it all. Hagrid was released, and with the Chamber of Secrets finally closed, the weight of his past began, at last, to loosen its grip, as though something long unresolved had finally been allowed to rest. The following year, with his chest filled with pride, and after the resignation of Sylvanus Kettleburn, Hagrid was appointed Professor of Care of Magical Creatures. For the first time, he was no longer simply the keeper of the grounds, but a teacher, a guide, a man entrusted with passing on what he loved most. And yet, as so often in his life, things did not remain simple for long. During one of his very first lessons, a young Slytherin student, Draco Malfoy, ignored Hagrid's warnings and insulted a hippogriff. The creature, Buckbeak, reacted as its nature demanded, striking back. What followed was swift and unforgiving. Under pressure from Lucius Malfoy, the Ministry ordered the execution of the creature, and once again, Hagrid found himself powerless before a system that seemed always ready to condemn what it did not understand. It was Harry, alongside Ron Weasley and Hermione Granger, who managed to set things right. Buckbeak would live. And then, the Triwizard Tournament arrived. A year unlike any other. Throughout the months that followed, Hagrid played an essential role behind the scenes. He assisted Charlie Weasley in handling the dragons for the first task. Creatures as dangerous as they were magnificent. It was Hagrid who, at the suggestion of Professor Moody, revealed them to Harry in advance, offering him a chance to survive what lay ahead. At the same time, he devoted himself to a peculiar and rather hazardous project for his students, the breeding of blast-ended Skrewts, creatures unpredictable even by Hagrid's standards, later used within the maze of the third task. But beyond the tournament, something else began to take shape. A connection between Hagrid and Olympe Maxime, the imposing headmistress of Beauxbaton. There was a quiet understanding between them, a shared presence, and perhaps the fragile beginning of something more. They danced together during the Yule Ball, and for a moment, Hagrid allowed himself to hope. He confided in her, spoke of his past, of what he was, believing she might understand. But when he revealed his giant heritage, something shifted. Madame Maxime denied it, rejected even the suggestion, and in doing so, distanced herself from him entirely. For Hagrid, it was a wound that cut deeper than he could easily show. Yet the year had not finished testing him. Hidden in plain sight, Rita Skeeter had been listening. In her animagus form, she overheard Hagrid's confession, and soon after, his story was twisted and printed in the Daily Prophet. What followed was cruel, but familiar. Judgment, fear, rejection. Letters filled with hatred began to arrive. Voices of a world that had never truly accepted him now grew louder than ever. And Hagrid withdrew. He retreated into his hut, isolating himself from the very place that had once given him purpose. For a time, his role as professor was taken over by Wilhelmina Grubbly-Plank, while Hagrid, overwhelmed and humiliated, even attempted to resign. But once again, he was not left alone. Dumbledore refused to accept his resignation, and it was Harry, Ron, and Hermione who went to him, who reminded him of who he was and why he mattered. Slowly, Hagrid returned, not because the world had changed, but because, once again, someone had chosen to stand beside him.
Of giants, family, and heart.
By the end of that same school year, as the Triwizard Tournament drew to its tragic conclusion, the death of Cedric Diggory marked something far greater than a single loss. It marked the return of Lord Voldemort, and with it, the beginning of the Second Wizarding War. When Albus Dumbledore confirmed what had happened, he did not hesitate. He sent Hagrid and Olympe Maxime as emissaries to the giant colonies of northeastern Minsk in the hope of persuading the giants not to align themselves with Voldemort in the coming conflict.
Listen to me.
With them, they brought gifts of rare exceptionality. A helmet forged by goblins and Gubrathian fire. A flame that had been enchanted to burn forever without ever dying. At first, their efforts seemed to bear fruit. Carcus, the Gur, the title given to the leader of a giant tribe, appeared willing to listen, and a fragile understanding was formed. But peace in that place was never meant to last. Two Death Eaters, dispatched by Voldemort for the same purpose, had already begun to move in the shadows, manipulating from within a rebellion led by Golgomath, a giant far more brutal, far more aligned with the ideology of violence. He challenged Carcus, and in a single act of sudden brutality, beheaded him, taking his place as leader. From that moment, everything collapsed. Golgomath aligned himself openly with the Death Eaters, and for Hagrid and Maxime, there was no longer any hope of diplomacy. They were forced to flee, barely escaping with their lives, but the journey did not end there. In the aftermath, Rubeus uncovered a truth that had long been buried. His mother, Friedwulfa, whom he had not seen since the age of 3, had long since died. But even more shocking was the discovery that she had given birth to another son, a half-brother, Grob, a giant smaller than the others, ridiculed and mistreated within his own kind, lost and dangerous in ways even Hagrid could not fully control. But he would not leave him there. He was all that remained of his family. He would protect him. He would take care of him. He would bring him to Hogwarts. Partway through the school year, Hagrid returned from his mission for Dumbledore, bringing Grob with him into the hidden edges of the Forbidden Forest. The endeavor was anything but easy. Despite the abuse he had previously suffered at the hands of his own kind, the giant would continually attempt to return to his old camp, only for his brother to force him across England against his will. Even that difficult year, with Dolores Umbridge at the head of the school, eventually drew to a close. And as the months passed, and thanks in part to an unexpected bond formed with the young Hermione Granger, Grop's belligerent temper began to improve day by day. The war in the meantime had reached its peak. Darkness stood poised to finally seize control. With the tragic death of Albus Dumbledore the following year, all seemed lost. It was a grief Hagrid had not felt since that distant second year at school, when he learned that his father would leave him forever. Yet he clenched his teeth and held his head high, refusing to give in, ever, exactly as Dumbledore had urged him to do, exactly as he would have wanted. And so, Hagrid was among the 13 members of the Order of the Phoenix, led by Alastor Moody, tasked with moving Harry Potter from the Dursleys' home before his 17th birthday, when the magical protection that had kept him safe until then would finally expire. Knowing that any Death Eaters watching would assume the most skilled Auror would be escorting the real Harry, Hagrid was instead given the crucial responsibility of protecting him in the sidecar of Sirius Black's motorcycle. At Hogwarts, Hagrid continued his duties as gamekeeper and as Professor of Care of Magical Creatures, and, at the request of the new headmaster, Severus Snape, he was placed in charge of students assigned detention. Detention with Hagrid consisted of work in the Forbidden Forest, far safer than detention with Amicus and Electo Caro, the two Death Eaters who, alongside Snape, now held control of the school. During the final battle against the forces of darkness, the one that would come to be known as the Battle of Hogwarts, Hagrid, of course, took part, fighting alongside the fury of his brother Grawp. And in the end, despite the pain, despite the darkness, despite the tears, Voldemort was defeated. This time, for real. The war was over. The sun had risen once more, warmer, broader, and more welcoming than before. And Rubeus Hagrid knew that among all those ruins, there lived something far greater and deeper than sight alone could ever capture. A kind of living spirit, a pulse of meaning he realized had filled his days since that distant 1st of September, when he had arrived at Hogwarts for the very first time. The awareness that there was so much beauty in this world, so much worth fighting for, so much worth rebuilding, brick by brick, into something better. Perhaps in the end, that was what magic truly was. The same magic Albus Dumbledore had always seen in him, when no one else could, not even Hagrid himself. And so, Hagrid rolled up his sleeves and got back to work once more. After all, there was no time to waste. He was the keeper of keys and grounds at Hogwarts, and he always would be.